Hi, I'm Craig Forrest, and you're listening to the We Are West Ham podcast.
You are listening to the We Are West Ham podcast with me, Will Pugh, Tom Edwards and James Jones. West Ham are 14th in the league and have 8 points from 7 pretty heinous-looking games. And now, surely, is the time that we push on and beat all the teams that we are supposed to beat, right? There's a sense of disappointment that we've been narrowly beaten at Anfield, and whoever you blame for the defeat, Mo Salah, King Arthur Masuaku, David Moyes or VAR, it's hard not to feel positive at the moment. I'm Will Pugh. I'm joined by James Jones and Tom Edwards. And in case anyone was wondering why I did that peculiar BBC Radio 4 style introduction, I would just like to give a big shout out to Steve Shepherd from Melbourne, Australia, who got in touch, as we always encourage all of our listeners to do every single week on Twitter. Get in touch with us with feedback, give us reviews on all of our major platforms, because we love hearing from you guys. And James Jones, who was dug out a couple of weeks ago by Phantom Hammer for, and I quote, having the sort of voice that could cure insomnia. I believe I'm right in saying that, Jonesy. Well, Steve Shepherd from Australia, absolutely delighted to have him listening from overseas. I'm not sure, I'll put it to the lads whether he's trumped Phantom Hammer or not. But a bit of feedback from Steve last week read thus: new listener, lads, been enjoying the podcast. However, constructive criticism, the you isn't necessary for the intro. Sounds like a dying giraffe. Just a casual, you are listening to the We Are West Ham podcast would be enough, in my opinion. Great pod, though. Cheers from Melbourne, Australia. Well, Steve, I hope that my new intro this week was appropriate for you. James Jones and Tom Edwards, delighted in drawing my attention to your message during the week, but we are thrilled to have your feedback and have you as a new listener to the podcast. We did strike a deal on Twitter with Steve. I said, fair play, Steve, glad to have you on board. How's this for a deal if you write along? If you write those words with a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen, I promised him that I'd cut down the you this week and give him a shout out. So we've opened the podcast with that. Jonesy, do you think my Radio 4 intro this week is better than my you are listening to the We Are West Ham podcast? And which, by the way, I picked up off Charlie Hawkins, former host of the West Ham show and the We Are West Ham podcast on Love Sport Radio. But how are you? What do you make of my new Radio 4 persona?
Good, thanks, mate. And well, I think you probably need to. You've gone a little bit the other way there, mate. I mean, if Phantom Hammer thinks I could cure insomnia, I don't know what that intro could do. I agree. The dying giraffe thing. I mean, I've never heard a giraffe die, but it's probably accurate. But yeah, that's got to be that. Definitely trumps Phantom Hammer for me.
Yeah.
I think you've. I mean,
well,
it's
look,
a good intro,
Tom,
mate. Though good.
Thanks. Do you like the posh twang to my voice that time? Did you?
Mate, just liven it up a little bit next time.
Right, fair enough. Look, Tom, as the only person who hasn't been dug out on Twitter yet, which is a bit disappointing. I would, of course, urge all the We Are West Ham, all the We Are West Ham listeners that if you have got anything at all negative to say about Tom, please do make those comments public. Either email wearewesthampod@gmail.com, but preferably put it on Twitter so all three of us and the world can see it. Tom, are you having the Radio 4, or do you miss my trademark? You are listening.
Listen, I'm a man of old school tastes, and Will, get it back, mate. Get it back. Put away with that BBC Radio 4. I need that you. I'm not on the edge of my seat. When you get that you going, I get going. Do you know what I mean? I need a little bit of that. So, mate, you're not getting rid of that easy, or I'll be on to you next week. But I love anyone who wants to say a bad word about Will Pugh. Get it on Twitter. Get it out there, because it makes me laugh all week. If ever I'm sad, I'll take a look at that tweet, and it made me happy. But it was brilliant.
Absolutely. Well, massive kudos to Steve from Melbourne, Australia, who's listening in. Hello, as ever, to all of our listeners, young and old, from near and from afar. Brilliant, obviously, to hear from the guys who listen overseas, and hello to any new listeners. Jonesy, we've got a little bit of a strange podcast tonight, a new opening, of course, and for those listening at home, it will be a little bit of a strange order, because you're with us for the introduction, but for our huge guest that we've got on tonight, another ex-player that we've got for you on the We Are West Ham podcast. We've got iconic West Ham goalkeeper from the 90s calling in from Toronto in Canada, none other than Craig Forrest. But you're here for the intro, part one of the interview with Craig, just me and Tom had to do. And then you'll dip back into the podcast in part three. Can you explain to everyone at home that they're not going crazy? Their podcast platform, wherever they listen, isn't broken. We Are West Ham podcast is fine, but there's just been a little bit of scheduling confusion.
Yeah, it's just I've just had one of those days where I missed the beginning of the chat with Craig Forrest, and obviously then we've gone back to do the intro, so it's all a little bit up in the air.
It's all this technical stuff the fans don't see, James, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean it's the trials and tribulations of running a successful and popular podcast, isn't it, mate?
And not all glitz and glamour. It's not all glitz and glamour.
Yeah, but it's not all. Yeah, but yeah, it makes for decent listening either way. I get introduced twice, which is always nice, isn't it? So
I've asked you how you are twice. Yeah.
I get to put people to sleep twice in one podcast. What more could the listeners want? What more could the listeners want? Going into lockdown and I'm putting people to sleep twice.
Exactly. Never mind ex-West Ham goalkeeper Craig Forrest, a double dose of James Jones. Yes, so anyone listening at home, do not worry. In part two, and then when it's just me and Tom talking to Craig, there is a little bit more at play, but James is back in part three, so do not switch off. Do not get to part two and think I'm not listening to Tom and Will and Craig Forrest. I need a bit of James Jones in my life. Do not fear, because he does come back in part three. So if nothing else, just skip forward about 10 minutes or so, and he'll be back. One other thing that is worth mentioning, Craig Forrest, he didn't get the memo that we normally send out, unfortunately, on the We Are West Ham podcast about swearing. So if you are of a nervous disposition or that sort of thing does offend you, tonight's podcast does include some swear words, which we usually try and avoid. So if that's not your thing, this week's episode might not be for you, but don't worry, next week we'll be back to our normal clean pre-watershed image. But just a warning in case anyone doesn't want to listen to that sort of thing, there is some swearing later on from Craig. But lads, brilliant show tonight, the interview with Craig Forrest, loads of things that we've asked him about, and it was brilliant. You'll hear it later on in the show, of course. Probably one of all of us, one of our favourite interviews. Anecdotes from Paolo Di Canio, his goalkeeping colleague Shaka Hislop, and Ludo McCloskey gave us his thoughts on the Liverpool game at the weekend. VAR, was it a dive from Salah or was it not? And a look ahead to the Fulham game this Saturday night at London Stadium. We'll have all of that with Craig, of course. We will have Joe on from the Fulhamish podcast for the opposition view to preview that game on Saturday. We'll have the Betway charity bets. No winners last week from me, James, Tom, or Tony Cotti. We'll talk about the Sebastian Haller situation. How do you solve a problem like Sebastian? We, of course, asked the We Are West Ham listeners for their thoughts, and we sent out a poll earlier today, and we just simply asked who was to blame for the defeat at Liverpool. And we'll, of course, cover the West Ham women and name that game later in the show. So loads to cover. But lads, James, first of all, lovely to have you again. Liverpool, what were your immediate thoughts after the game?
I thought we were unlucky. Salah's bought a penalty, not for the first time in his career. I think when you've got a situation like that where a player's made contact, yeah, absolutely. VAR should be looking at that. That's what VAR's for. I mean, are we going into a game where you can't touch the opposition player in the penalty box, particularly with part of the body where you're supposed to be playing with? So yeah, he's bought the penalty. It happens. We've seen it happen. The frustration is that VAR didn't overturn the decision, but I think it was an okay performance. And had we left Anfield with a point, I don't think even Liverpool or Jurgen Klopp would have really begrudged us at a point. So a lot of positives to take. I think we've gone to Liverpool many times in the past and been turned over. This time we haven't, and we go into this Fulham game at the weekend with a lot of confidence, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I do think, Jonesy, the talk has all been this week about the dive, or was it a dive, wasn't it a dive, etc., etc. We'll cover that in more detail with Craig. But the thing I can't get away from, which I think is worth talking about, and I think he's escaped criticism for, is Pablo Fornals when he's through on goal in the second half at 1-1. It's 2-on-1, him and Bowen against the keeper. Bowen is screaming for the ball 5 yards to his left, and if he slides it across, it's an open goal. And he elects to shoot, and it gets closed down. I find that more annoying than the penalty. I think it's, Masuaku. It's the way of the game at the moment, whether we agree with it or not, that should be a penalty. We'll cover that in more detail later in the show. He shouldn't kick out. You just don't get that close to him. Don't give him the chance. It's such an easy thing to say, but it was a bit of a lazy foot, and Masuaku just stops as soon as Salah goes down. Tom, what's your take on those things, just briefly, because we'll go into it a little bit more. But what was your sort of feeling on those things and your general thoughts after the game?
Overriding, mate, was very happy to be in another game against a top six side who ran away with the league last season, and to be very competitive, arguably the better team in the first half, not even arguably the better team in the first half. We created chances throughout. We're a very, very solid team right now. When we play in that system and we play against teams who are going to dictate the ball, we are probably the hardest team in the minute to break down and create chances against, because we defend tight, compact. We don't give space. We let them play wide, and we got big blokes in the box who are going to defend crosses. And I think that we've come together and we've got team spirit, which allows us to defend very well against the top six. My only thing going into the next weekend, it isn't any doubt in those players and their ability. It's just in the way the game's going to go, in that we're going to have the ball. Fulham are going to sit a bit deeper. We've averaged 34% possession the last 4 or 5 weeks, and the weeks we've done very well. So having the ball, being the ones who've got to make things happen, seeing what we can do then. I'm not saying we can't do it. It's just a question mark, and it's there to be proved by the team that they can do. We've got the armory. We've got Thomas Susek who will win headers against Virgil van Dijk, Joe Gomez, and Michael Hector, and Anderson, and whoever it is, he'll win headers against. So we've got a weapon. We just got to use a bit more flair, a bit more creativity, and a bit more subtle. Like you said, that 4 hours type of thing is the type of thing which you've got to get right next week, because they'll be sitting back and we won't be creating clear-cut chances on the break like that. So you just got to hope that the Moyes has the ability and the armory to change it and realise that we can make things happen as a front foot side as opposed to being a back foot side. He's going to defend, but no complaints about what
Absolutely.
I saw last week.
All right, just quick fire then, lads. Jonesy, Said Benrahma, does he start at the weekend? Just really quick. Does he start? Does Haller start? Does Yarmolenko start? Does Fornals start? What are you saying for Fulham Saturday night?
I'd like to see Benrahma start this week. I thought he came on way too late at Anfield.
Yeah.
I would bring him in for Fornals. Fornals has had a really good season so far, but I'll bring him in just to see what he can do. That's how I'd play it. Or you bench Haller, even though I think Haller should start. Play Bowen through the middle, and then play Fornals and Benrahma either side. And that's a pretty good front three, to be fair. Yeah. It's just I have a feeling he'll still stick with Haller because he needs that goal for his confidence, and he'll fancy himself against Fulham.
Tom?
I think he'll stick with the same, and I think rightly so. I think we'll get more crosses in the box next week. I think they'll defend a bit deeper. Haller will get more chances within the width of the 18-yard box. He won't have to do channel running. I'm with Jonesy. If I was picking, I might go with that. But I just think if we're going to have the lion's share of the game, Haller has to play and get balls in the box the way Cresswell and Masuaku have been doing all year, and he'll come up trumps because he can hurt any team in the air. I don't care who it is. Haller's got a lot of quality, and he's just waiting to break out.
Okay, just to hopefully it will need a bit of a change of system, won't it? Just to play a little bit more direct. And if that's going to work, such an age-old thing in football, if that's going to work, you need the players around him. I think Bowen is buzzy enough to get in and around Haller, whether it's Benrahma or Fornals. I wouldn't start Benrahma. I think you bench him again. You can't destroy Fornals' confidence. He's been really good. He scored at Anfield last weekend. All right, he should pass across to Bowen, but he's been really good this season. He's just coming into his own. I think it's too much of a risk destroying his confidence like that when, it is Fulham as well. You could take him off after it's 60 minutes or whatever, and it's not so much of a snub, even if Moyes does want to play Ben Rama instead. And even though, Jonesy, you keep backing Bowen to score every week, he's not as dangerous in front of goal, in my opinion, as Fornals. But we'll go into all of that in more detail in the rest of the show. Like I say, we'll have Joe Santon from the Fulhamish podcast on to give us a view from the opposition. But lads, we did a shirt giveaway, a West Ham shirt for this season, home, away or third kit. And I'm delighted to announce on the podcast that Chrissy at Coffers WHU, West Ham season ticket holder in block 230. She's got a soft spot for Manchester City, and she's hashtagged her Twitter bio, hashtag GSB out. But Chrissy has won the West Ham shirt for this season. We'll be in touch with her to whether she wants the home, away or third kit. But do keep an eye on us on Twitter. Follow us at @WeAre_West Ham, because we will have a load more giveaways for you, the We Are West Ham listeners, to get involved with throughout the season. But massive congratulations to Chrissy, who wins the replica shirt of her choice for this season. Lads, as well as Twitter, the fans can of course watch us and the shows this season on YouTube. The YouTube videos go up slightly later than the actual podcast. They go up some point early to mid Wednesday afternoon. The shows go up on YouTube. But if you fancy seeing me and the boys and tonight's guest, Craig Forrest, in the flesh, or almost in the flesh, seeing us instead of just listening, head to the link to our YouTube channel, which is in the description to this podcast. It's We Are West Ham podcast on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter at @WeAre_West Ham. We're on Instagram as well. Do give us a review if you can. We had that brilliant Twitter review, of course, from Steve, who's agreed to give us a 5-star and put that acute criticism of my introduction and delivery to the podcast. I don't care what you say, if you put it alongside a 5-star review, we are more than grateful. And like we said, it's Tom Edwards' turn to get dug out on this podcast, so feel free to do that. And one thing that we always say, don't we, Jonesy, is that as much as all of that stuff really does help, we do appreciate the reviews, just tell someone about what we're doing.
Sorry, what?
Just tell someone about the We Are West Ham podcast.
Oh right, yeah, sorry. Yeah, obviously
that's flawless.
Seamless.
Just like, what do you mean, what we're doing? We're chatting about West Ham, mate. Obviously, it'd be great to spread the word. Tell your mates. If they haven't already heard of us, then make sure that they're subscribing, leaving reviews, getting on our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, you name it, we're on it. You name the platform, we're on it. Tell your mates to listen, particularly to this week, because it's an absolute gem, to this episode with Craig Forrest.
Exactly. Yeah, some brilliant anecdotes coming your way. Paolo Di Canio, Shakir Slot, Ludo McCloskey, to name but a few. So, brilliant show coming up tonight. And Craig Forrest, former Canadian international and West Ham backup keeper, is coming up next. You are still listening to the We Are West Ham podcast with me, Will Pugh, Tom Edwards, and we are delighted to be joined this week by West Ham's iconic goalkeeper from the 90s. I remember him most for his outstanding hair. You'll all have your own personal memories of the one and only Craig Forrest. Craig, absolutely brilliant to be joined by you this evening. Just so everyone at home listening, where exactly is it that you're dialing into the We Are West Ham podcast from?
Right now I'm in Toronto, Canada, and just bunkered down like everybody else around the world, really, with this pandemic. And yeah, I used to, when I was at West Ham, I definitely had better hair than I do now.
well, that's not for me to say. I don't think it's fair for me to kick off the podcast by insulting you, so perhaps we'll leave that for part 2. But it's wonderful to have you with us nonetheless. Tom, as always, brilliant to have a guest of Craig's caliber on the podcast. We've done our little introductory opening thoughts there, Tom, on what we thought of the Liverpool game last week. Craig, I'd be interested to sort of get your outlook on the whole thing. It was, from my perspective, another great game, another great performance from the boys. And I think to come away disappointed by only losing by a goal at Anfield is just testament to where the club are at this season. What are you making for what have you sort of made of it all from overseas?
Well, first of all, I think that with the start of the season, as difficult as it was, we looked at that Newcastle game, first game of the season, as really important to pick up 3 points. It was a terrible performance, and I think most of us were thinking, is it possible that this club, our club, could be at the bottom of the Premier League with 0 points after 6 or 7 games, with an incredibly tough schedule? From that, they've really come on and cracked on to a point where they're certainly really well organized. They seem to know what they want to do. Moises seems to have a game plan. And yeah, it was a game where, when you're sitting back and you're bunkering back, and we talked about this before we started the podcast, just how, you are inviting possibilities of being broke down. And sometimes I like to see a little bit more aggressive type of style. But saying that, the chances were there. There were some opportunities in the game where it could have been different. Separated away from the Salah penalty, which was soft. That's another topic altogether. But overall, you're going to the champions and you only lose by a goal in a place where they haven't lost for an awful long time. It was a promising result. And with a good schedule coming up, let's hope that they can capitalize on that, starting with Fulham.
I think that's exactly it. I think that's the one thing that everyone's been talking about in the week is the penalty. Tom, obviously, we'll get your thoughts on it as well. But Craig, just what do you think of the penalty? There seems to be differing camps of thought. One group of people saying, well, no, that is a penalty. He's made contact. I don't think anyone's arguing that he's made contact. Everyone agrees that. So you've got the people who go, yep, it was a penalty. He made contact. There you go. Contact in the box. That's it. And another group of people going, yeah, but is that what we want football to look like? Yes, he touched him, but that's nowhere near enough to make a grown man fall to the floor in the manner that he did, or fall to the floor at all, regardless of the manner. And do we want football to be certainly like when you played, Craig, where a penalty or a foul was because an action by an opponent stopped progress and caused that person to fall over or stop running or stop doing a piece of skill they were doing? From my perspective, none of that happened. What's your take on it all?
Well, first of all, you're right. We have to decide on what we want to see, because clearly it wasn't enough to pull down a grown man. Was it contact? Yeah, absolutely. We talked about that too. That is absolutely the case. But from a VAR point of view, I thought the whole point of that was to see what was real and what wasn't. And now, on the other hand, would you see a penalty unless somebody hits the ground? Unfortunately, you don't. Sometimes you can see shirts being pulled, people don't embellish, but the referees aren't giving the penalty. So players are now in a position, well, unless I hit the deck, I'm not going to get the penalty. So until we start seeing penalties given without people embellishing or hitting the deck, that's going to what we have to decide on what we want to see. I personally don't like it. I thought the whole idea was, the game is a contact sport. There's going to be some contact. Are we going to decide on whether that is minimal in the box and we're going to give penalties? That's clearly the way VAR seems to be going. So we're going to just see more and more people hit the deck in the box, because the actual, what you're getting out of it compared to the downside of diving, even if you get a yellow card, is just that. So there's a big upside to the dive in the box, the flop, than there is a downside to it. Maybe we need to make it the other way around, make it more, give more of a penalty to people that actually do try to embellish and hit the deck.
Craig, going back to the actual game, you said that we went into our bunker and it did seem like that for 60 minutes. Do you put that down partly to the fact that we missed Antonio? We didn't have an outball, someone who can run the channels and have his less dynamic, sort of relies on straight balls, winning their first headers, and he wasn't really able to do that. Do you think that we changed tactics, or it's just the fact that Haller can't simply do Antonio's job that he's asked to do under Moyes?
No, you make a good point. I think that massively played into the part of how they win about the game against Liverpool, for sure. No question about that. And you're sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't, depending on how you play against teams. Man City's a similar team. If you bunker in, you're just waiting for trouble, but if you come at them, you're going to get broke down too. So when you're short of a player that's that dynamic, obviously that's going to change your game plan and put you into a position, which they did very well. I think they stuck to it very well as a team, and that's promising looking forward.
Craig, I've touched on it in the intro there, Tom, where we chatting about it. The thing for me, I'm a big advocate of personal responsibility in life in general, not just football, and I take on the same mantle I try to when talking about West Ham. And whilst all the VAR chat, is Mo Salah a cheat, should Arthur Masuaku have put his foot out in that position, while all that's been going on, the main takeaway that I had from the game was not whether or not VAR was right or whether Salah dived or the state of football these days, blah, blah, blah. It was more, well, if Pablo Fornals knocks the ball across to Jared Bowen, I think, when he was through on goal in the second half when the scores were still 1-1, it's a completely different conversation we're having. I know he put us 1-0 up, but I think it seems to have been glossed over. But to me, that was a huge error, an absolutely huge error. The pass was glaringly obvious for all to see. And that's my main takeaway. I think the VAR chat and the penalty chat is neither here nor there, because if that goes in, you get a win or at least a point out of the game.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Games are about moments in them as well, and it's about a little bit of quality. And I think if that opportunity happens down the other end, Liverpool score it. It was definitely on. It was something that had to be done. It was split-second decision, but if that pass was laid on, it would have been certainly a goal, you would imagine, and how different the game could actually be. So you could talk about VAR all you like. And also, when we talk about VAR and Salah's situation, I mean, it's easy to be blinded by, blind faith in West Ham, but really thinking about this objectively, and not just our West Ham, but just how the game and how VAR is going down the road, regardless of who it happens to. It could happen to Liverpool against West Ham too. So it's just how that happened. But you're right about the game. Little moments, but promising result just the same, even though they lost.
Craig, going forward, so we've played 5 at the back this season, and they only came in after the Newcastle game. It's been great for these top 6. We've been brilliant. We've been very hard to beat. But next week we've got Fulham. Week after that, I think it's Sheffield United and Aston Villa. Is it going to be inhibiting when we've got Rice and Souček, brilliant midfielders in their own right, but they're not the most creative players? Is it going to come into play that we might need to look at doing something a bit different, because we do defend deep, we don't have much ball, and we look very dangerous on the counter-attack, but Fulham aren't going to give us that space, and they're going to defend deep, so it's going to be a completely different game. Yeah. Is there an argument to suggest that we need to change something personnel-wise or formation-wise, because we need to create chances, and we're going to have the ball majority of that game, you'd like to think? Yeah,
that's right. It's a very good point. And when you're changing from going into playing so many good teams and really strong teams where you're going to play deep, you're going to play 5 at the back, and then try to change in a manner where, and Fulham will know this as well, that this is going to be a completely different thing. And it might be, them sitting back on West Ham and having the players and the ability to break that down is not easy. As we know, back in the day, with the West Ham team that I played for, some teams would sit back at Upton Park against us because of the quality we had in midfield, the quality we had up front, and we were dangerous in those ways too. So you need some ability, you need some quality, you need some inventiveness to be able to do that, and it's going to be completely different than what we've seen. And Fulham are coming off a good result against West Bromwich Albion too, so they're going to be flying high and think that their opportunity for 3 points is there as well. So how Moyes and the staff go about putting into a position where they create some more chances will be very interesting indeed. And you're right about the side needing to have some creativity in it.
Wouldn't that be lovely to see a team come to London Stadium and sit back these days? How wonderful that would be to see a team come and be fearful of us going forward. I think the last time I really remember that happening was the last season at Upton Park, and you had Payet, Lanzini and Sacco running riot. But Craig, we as we always do every week, we like to get the We Are West Ham listeners involved in the show, and we always put a poll out just before or in the day before we record. And today, normally we look forward to the week ahead, be it selection or game, the style of play that the fans want to see David Moyes play. But this week we thought we would have a look back, because it was such a contentious decision. And we asked the We Are West Ham listeners this week, just a simple one: who do you think was most at fault for last weekend's 2-1 defeat to Liverpool? David Moyes, Arthur Masuaku, Sebastian Haller or VAR? Now, I am a little bit disgruntled that Pablo Fornals wasn't included in that, but I think as he scored, I think the whole reputation of our podcast might have gone down the drain if we'd have put that one on. But perhaps unsurprisingly, the We Are West Ham listeners have voted 67% for VAR, 13.2 for Sebastian Haller, 12.1 for Arthur Masuaku, and 7.7 for David Moyes. Rob has said VAR was awful, but Haller was just as bad. Bring on Yarmolenko and bring on Fulham. How can anyone say Haller or Arthur? That's from Ian Bowen. Moyes Boy says it is Liverpool and only a couple of clubs are expected to get a point or three. I think we played well enough. Kevin McAllister, sort of backing what you say, Craig, we sat back far too much against a side that was questionable defensively. The substitutions were too late to make a difference. This is on Moyes. Alan Rzepa, probably Yarmolenko, and Mardi simply says anything other than VAR is wrong. Tom, you've heard what Craig's got to say there. You've heard what the We Are West Ham listeners have got to say. What's your sort of main takeaway from the game afterwards? How are you feeling?
I think I was a little bit initially at the end of the final whistle. I was quite surprised that we put in enough, not surprised, but very happy in a sense that we look a solid team, tough to beat, and we'll go and give anyone a problem. And we look like we've got real togetherness. So I took happiness from that. But then I look back at the game, and like you said, the Fornals one was terrible. He's got to give that ball in it. If low on his left foot, you'd like to think Bowen scores that 7 out of 10 times minimum. And then the other one was all right. It's soft, and it probably shouldn't have been a penalty in the way. But it's a poor tackle to make from Masuaku. He's going away from goal. It's Salah. He knows he's that type of player. He's going to throw to ground. He's gone through him. Didn't even show him any of the ball. It was just a stupid tackle. Masuaku played absolutely brilliant all but 1 second of that game. And 1 second has cost us and probably cost us maybe getting something out of the game to concede a penalty in the 40th minute when they hadn't had a shot on target. Probably looked the least dangerous they've looked in the last 2 years and maybe the whole 63-game unbeaten run they had at Anfield, and we give him such an easy way back in the game, confidence flowing, and then we sit deeper and deeper and deeper as the game goes on. That tends to be how we play recently. So I think it's not one person to blame. I think it was collective culpability because there was just too many poor mistakes which change a game, and the main one was Masuaku for me. I'm not blaming him, but I just think it's a silly tackle to make. It was soft, shouldn't have been a penalty, but if you give in the ref a decision to make against Mo Salah, one of the biggest con men in the league in terms of buying fouls, he's going to get it. And he's got what he wants and he got what he played for, and he's the man who steps up and slots it away, and he's done his job for the day. So I think that was the biggest annoyance for me, really.
They call that an art form, some people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Me. Yeah, up front, but I'm there. Go on.
Tell us how you really feel about it next time, though, Tom. Don't beat around the bush like that. Craig, you would tell us earlier on, just before we hit the record button, about an interesting sort of part of the game of hockey, or ice hockey, obviously the national sport in your homeland there. Just tell us, or tell the listeners a little bit more about the concept they have in terms of like simulation and diving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of an interesting one, and you could argue both ways that it doesn't work or it does work. But if, for instance, on the ice, there's a foul, a hooking penalty, and somebody does what, say, Salah does, feels that contact and flops to the ice, the referees can still say there is enough there for a foul, but there is also embellishment, and there'll be a penalty for that embellishment of some sort. That could be the case on the Salah penalty. VAR could say, yeah, I think there was enough contact that's a foul, but there was clearly embellishment in trying to sell that to the referee. And yeah, we saw that, and we were going to give you a yellow card or whatever that could be for that. Just a thought, something that certainly works here in the sport of hockey. So to try to get that embellishment out of the game, I thought that was the whole point of VAR and those blatant dives in the box without contact. Now they're saying, well, there was contact, so it's a foul. I mean, rubbish. They got to sort that out.
Absolutely, yeah. I think a lot of players, Mikel Antonio, the latest West Ham player to come out and call for VAR just to be completely scrapped. I think we're a little bit too far down the road for that to happen now, of course, but certainly some more mature use of it, I think.
Sorry, guys, I believe that there's a place for VAR in the game. I really do. It's just how implicating it and how they're putting it in and applicating it. So it's how they're dealing with that is wrong. But I think it still has a great part to play in the game if it's used properly. And hopefully they'll get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, I think I'd
Craig,
like to.
sorry, Will, can I just, Craig, on that? Do you think it would benefit? It's not revolution what I'm about to say, but do you think it would help having ex-players on it? I've heard a lot of people say that, and because no one understands the game better. Do you think having a panelist of ex-players, or at least one on, would change the way VAR is used?
Yeah, potentially it would. But you have to have a certain consistency too, because even ex-players put in that position, looking at a VAR situation is like that, it could go either way. It really could. So you have to be consistent. You have to say, okay, if that sort of play happens and there's embellishment to the point where it's not enough to bring a grown man down and there's a contact element to this sport still, well, then we're going to have to look at that and have to change the way they actually use VAR in those situations.
That is exactly it, isn't it? You did the contact sport part of it. But I must admit, I did like the referee for the disallowed goal late on for Liverpool before they actually scored. I did like the referee just jogging over, looking at the screen. I was furious because I thought, how has he told him to look at the screen? It's so obvious. But it's on the pitch decision then. He goes, has another look at what he's already seen. And then he says, no, actually, I missed that. Yeah, foul. There we go.
Yeah. There's exactly a very good example about how VAR was used very well, and it was the right call in the end. I know some of the commentators, I don't know if there's a saying that we're doing the game over here, but it was clearly a foul on Fabian.
Yeah.
You can't just go fucking carrying in on the guy. Yeah. They're questioning whether it was. It's like I don't even get why this is even an issue, and I'm glad that the officials got that absolutely right. So it worked well.
I had my hands either side of the TV at that stage, just waiting for the goal to be given to launch it out the window if it had, and that would have been me with football forever. Tom, I think we're all agreed as far as the VAR goes. Everyone's thoughts are clear. It's unfortunate, but don't you think? I think Craig's touched on it there. We've touched on it in the intro. It's brilliant, isn't it, to be back disappointed to only lose by 1 at Anfield. We're 14th in the table, which again doesn't sound fantastic, but the games we had were really challenging. Everyone knew that, and it just feels it's hard not to be quite positive at the moment. Even though if you're an outsider, you looked at the league and went 14th, 2 wins, 2 draws, and 3 defeats from 7. I think it is. If you look at that from the outside, then it's hard not to be positive at the moment, Tom, isn't it?
Absolutely, mate. And when we've scored as many goals as we had, I think we're top 6 goal scorers in the league, despite playing last season's top 6 effectively, or most of the Champions League contenders already this season. We've won away at Leicester. You look at them yesterday at Leeds, and everyone else calling them a proper side. Them and Wolves are in the top 4. We really did a number on both of them and really quite comfortably beat 2 very, very top sides. And then Spurs, we only turned it on for 10 minutes, looked great. City, we were well worth the point. If the first half went our way and we maybe stuck another one in, who knows, we could have had 3 extra points. So, mate, so many positives. The front 3 is starting to gel. When it was Antonio in there, those 3 look like they all know their jobs. As a defensive unit, very, very positive. We've conceded one of the least goals in the season as well. Bar Arsenal, who've conceded 7 or something like that. So we've had a brilliant start in a number of aspects. And like you say, 14th is a bit disappointing, but a win on Saturday, I think it's Saturday 8 p.m. It changes everything. And then you got Sheffield United, and then you got Villa, and if you get 3 wins there, then you're really starting to look at a positive Christmas run. And who knows from there, if you end Christmas and you're really in amongst the European hunt, then honestly, who knows? Because we've got the players there to make things happen and do it. And now I think Moyes is starting gradually to impart a bit of belief in this squad and the fan base and get a bit more of a positive atmosphere. So it's way far away from where I thought we'd be. Speaking at the start of this pod this season, mate, I thought we'd be sat here calling for people's heads already and whatever, but we're not. And it feels weird, but it feels great.
Absolutely.
It's one of those situations, guys, really, where it's not really the position in the table is important. It's how many points you picked up in that period of time. And you're absolutely right. Now it's just about, when you're looking forward to these other schedules, the team still has to go through the process of getting the points. So it's very important, obviously, that they actually capitalize now on a schedule that's in their favor. And we know that doesn't always happen. And obviously playing in a derby against Fulham is going to be a very difficult proposition, even though West Ham look like the favorite.
In 7 games' time, Craig, after these 7 supposedly winnable games that we've got coming up, we're going to play back that clip and we're going to go,
Yeah.
do you remember at the beginning of November, we had iconic West Ham goalkeeper Craig Forrest on. Brilliant to have him on. It was really feel-good factor at the club. And here's what Craig said. It's really important to build on these next 7 games that are winnable. And look at us now. I
Crying.
can just see it.
Yeah, either that or top 6. Who knows?
There you go. A bit of I like this transatlantic positivity we've injected into the show this week, Tom. It's certainly not something.
Yeah, he's not drinking our water, that's for sure. He's not had our water.
Yeah, I'm glad I didn't come on after the Newcastle game because I bet that was different.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, somewhat of a different tone, that's for sure. But look, Craig is we're delighted to say that Craig's going to stay with us for a little while longer. We'll ask him about the Fulham game at the weekend, and of course we won't waste the opportunity to ask him about his time at West Ham, some of his teammates, and what he makes of the goalkeeping situation at West Ham at the moment, with many suggesting that perhaps Lucas Fabianski's time may come to an end at the end of this season or next, and it's time to start looking ahead, given his age. We'll have all of that and lots more next. You are still listening to the We Are West Ham podcast with me, Will Pugh, Tom Edwards, James Jones, and iconic West Ham goalkeeper joining us from Toronto, Canada. It's none other than Craig Forrest. Craig giving us the lowdown on the Liverpool game there, his views on VAR, and Tom blaming His Royal Highness King Arthur Masuaku for the defeat at Anfield. Such blasphemy. I'm not sure what sort of punishment those sort of words, that sort of heresy entails from Tom Edwards there, but I'm sure there'll be appropriate kickback on Twitter from Arthur's loyal subjects. Well, Fulham at the weekend, Jonesy, just to let everyone know, James Jones had to join us late, but we're absolutely delighted that he's managed to peel himself away from his very hectic, busy professional lifestyle that he leads, combined with a family life. Jonesy, wonderful to see you, mate. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks, guys. Yeah, sorry I'm late. Just been one of those days where work and parenthood get on top of you. So yeah, it's just been one of those hectic days. But I'm here now, here to talk positive stuff about West Ham.
We've got
Sounds like a West Ham game you're talking about.
yeah, you're actually right, Craig. Yeah, I mean, I have felt like that throughout the day.
West Ham fan.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's kind of like a parallel.
Right.
We got Craig Forrest managing to dial in from the other side of the planet, Jonesy, and you can't even get on Zoom from Boreham Wood. But it could be worse. We've still got Tom Edwards as part of the We Are West Ham podcast, so the bar for punctuality is, of course, extremely low. But back to football, Craig. One thing before we go on to the specifics about the Fulham game, one thing while we've got you here, I've noticed recently, and everyone who's linked with West Ham will be aware of how celebrated Mark Noble is, and now Declan Rice, who's coming through as well. Mark Noble in particular, because he was a boyhood West Ham fan. When you were playing for the club, there was still that spine of not so much English guys or British guys, but actual West Ham supporters as well. John Moncur, who we're hoping to get on in the coming weeks, hoping to have him tonight, but unfortunately couldn't nail him down last minute. But you had that spine of players in your team who were West Ham fans first and foremost, but English guys who sort of understood how the club worked and how the league worked. Do you think nowadays, obviously Mark Noble is one of a dying breed of that sort of one club man, that doesn't really happen anymore? And if you look at West Ham's squad at the moment, it's obviously multinational, but after Noble goes, you're going to lack any at all like boyhood West Ham fans. How do you think that affects clubs these days? Because I'm assuming, well, tell us, when you were there, you had people who cared, really, really cared about the club because it had always been part of their life.
Yeah, and even ones that wasn't part of their life all the time, or Paolo Di Canio. I mean, he fell in love with West Ham, truly fell in love with West Ham. He still loves the club today. And that was helped by the guys like, Sinclair and John Moncur and Rio Ferdinand and Frank Lampard and Michael Carrick and all these players that came through the youth system there too, and also had a connection to West Ham. Not all of them, but certainly knew the importance and what it meant to the fans. And I think that's important. It also goes to ownership as well. I mean, we've always had, up until recent decades, we've had ownership that had usually a stake or some emotional stake in football clubs and that connection to the clubs. I think we've lost that in a lot of aspects, certainly with the rich owners from the United States and Russia and the Arab world as well. So you've lost that. And also they're caring for what is actually right for football and not just what's right for their own clubs and their own interests. So it all plays a part. It's important to have that connection, I think, as a fan, and have local players playing. Hopefully that will happen again at West Ham. I'm absolutely sure it will. But as the game has changed, more multinationals come into the Premier League, you're going to see a difference, and maybe a case where players are coming and they don't really get taught, they don't know the whole fabric and the culture of the area or the team itself. Now, whether they perform or not, that's down to them. They have to perform. They're looking after their own trade, their own marks, their own brand themselves. So they're going to perform regardless of that. But I think when you add that little bit extra to it, and what I learned from West Ham, from John Lyle that went to Ipswich, Phil Parks was my goalkeeper coach, Mick McGibbon was my assistant coach. So real connection to West Ham there, going before I even moved to West Ham in 1997. I knew the importance of it. I knew the excitement of around the club, and I couldn't have dreamt of going to a better club as far as what it means to the area and the fans.
Do you think that obviously West Ham moved stadiums, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, and obviously when you played at the club, and obviously all those players that you've mentioned and that Will mentioned, that it wasn't just knowing what it meant to play for West Ham, but also sort of knowing the history of the ground and knowing the history of the area, and obviously West Ham was part of Green Street, part of the bowling ground and everything else. And obviously so much has changed. The identity of the club's changed. And do you think that, just building on Will's point and your point just now, is that, do you think that now more than ever, figures like Mark Noble, figures like even Kevin Nolan, who's part of the coaching staff, particularly when the club almost feels so much disconnected to its illustrious history, more so now going into what is supposed to be a new era, it's more important to keep the likes of Noble at the club, Declan Rice at the club for as long as possibly can.
Yeah, it is. And not only that, is having backroom staff that also have that connection to the club too, and can relay that to players as well, and the story and the history. I mean, I was a historian. I mean, when I came to England in 1984 at Ipswich Town, from that time on, I always wanted to learn about the history of Ipswich and the league and the history of clubs, and took an interest in that because the history is amazing. I mean, you guys all grew up West Ham fans. You know where it came from, where it started, and that is important to you, and it's part of the fabric. It's not necessarily the winning of the league that keeps you at West Ham. It's because your grandfather and your grandfather and your great-granddad all went to the game, and that history, and you sat at Upton Park in a certain area, Chicken Run, wherever, for years and years, and generation after generation, that was the case in the same area of the park. So now you've changed that, and that's now going to take years before you ever establish that at a stadium like at the Olympic Stadium. And there's a reason why football in Italy, for instance, in those giant Olympic stadiums soon fell out of favor. They're just not good for a spectacle. And unfortunately, that's just where West Ham is at the moment. It's not going to change. We have to get on with it. And also winning makes a big difference as well. If the team starts to win and you're in that stadium, I don't think it's going to matter where you're playing. But that iconic Upton Park is, much as it was fallen down and rough around the edges, was an incredible special place. And now the new generations will have to learn about another place, and the atmosphere is going to be completely different. We just can't get away from that. And that's just the way it is, unfortunately.
Great. Moving to now, and with our keeper situation, your field of expertise, we've got, obviously Fabianski has been brilliant since we brought him, absolutely brilliant, but his age is moving forward. He's made a few mistakes in the last 8 months. What would how long basically do you think he can be our number one before it's the sort of situation we need to look to actually lay down a big piece of money on a goalkeeper? Because I don't think we ever have really, except 7 million on him. I think that's the record we've ever paid for a goalie. So, yeah, what do you think about Fabianski and moving forward?
We nearly paid that for Phil Parks, didn't we?
Yeah.
Phil Parks, what a legend.
Legend.
Yeah.
Sorry, Craig. Sorry.
He's a great man as well. Sorry, Fabianski, what is he, 35, right? So he's, he looks after himself. We've seen goalkeepers go into their late 30s. You could get 2-3 years out of him for sure. That could be the case, but you're going to have to start looking elsewhere eventually, obviously. I liked Adrian, too. I thought there was a time when West Ham, the goalkeeper position was solid, didn't need to change it, had a good couple goalkeepers, 2 or 3 very strong goalkeepers, and that was the case. But now when you're looking at a 35-year-old, you're going to be looking elsewhere or looking for down the line is in the future about who can support him, come in behind him for a couple of years and maybe move him in the first team.
Sorry, is that something, Craig, that you, with goalkeepers, obviously they can play that little bit longer. Darren Randolph is an excellent backup. We saw what a catastrophe Roberto was last season. And is it something that you really worry about age-wise? Because we have seen goalkeepers play on if they want to. I think Ben Foster's in well into his late 30s now at Watford. We've seen goalkeepers play knocking on the door of 40. Gigi Buffon only recently retired. Yeah, Van der Sar as well.
Yeah.
Dino's off was 41, I think, when he won the World Cup, I think. So yeah, it can go. I mean, one thing about having an experienced goalkeeper is that you have that experience. I felt really in my career between the ages of 32 and 35 were probably the best years as far as the experiences that you've gone through, the ups and downs, the roller coaster of emotions that you have as a player, especially a young player. That can be hard to deal with, especially, but certainly get used to that. When you're older, you've seen just about everything. And you're just a little happier in yourself and where you are. So all these things play a part into a goalkeeper's mind and their mental stability, really, when they're goalkeeping, because it's such a mental part of the game. I've seen some fantastic goalkeepers growing up that weren't able to handle the pressures. And what happens when you do make a bunch of mistakes in a row? Because it will happen. And can you get yourself through that? Like a De Gea, for instance, something like that, he didn't have the best year last year, still a great goalkeeper. What is his issues? It's all between the ears. He just has to get through that. And those are the most difficult parts of your career, is trying to battle through those demons after making a few mistakes in a row.
Just, I'll tell you what, we'll save it for after we look forward to the Fulham game. We'll get the Betway charity bets from the lads. Craig, I do want to ask you about Roberto last season, because I know everyone was quick to hammer him, and understandably so. But I'd like to get into the head of someone who, would likely understand, or certainly got a far better chance of understanding what Roberto was thinking last season, how he was feeling coming into the club and performing the way he did. But now Jonesy has joined us. Tom is back together. We'll do the Betway charity bet section as we always do each week before we look ahead to the Fulham game. We've got an opposition view coming up with Joe from the Fulhamish podcast, so we'll cover that a bit later on. But the Betway charity bets first. Jonesy, no winners last week. I think all of us victims. Tony Cottee, of course, on last week's podcast, joining in, and he went for a West Ham win, a Jared Bowen goal, and less than 8 corners. None of those things came in, unfortunately. Jonesy, I think you had Kufal carded, Bowen goal, and over 3.5 goals. Not really that close. I think I came fairly close. I said penalty awarded in the game, Souček to score anytime, and over 4.5 total bookings. The penalty was a no-brainer, if you ask me. We've obviously covered that already extensively. Tom, both teams to score over 8.5 corners and West Ham to win.
Not listening.
Huh?
Not listening to it. It was just thinking.
Yeah, not. I say, unfortunately, no. It was probably our week where we weren't even close on any fronts, really, Jonesy. But are you a bit more confident going into this week?
Yeah, I am. We've come to the end of that difficult run of fixtures, haven't we? And go into this weekend against Fulham, which could prove to be a bit of a sticking point. But I'm feeling positive with my Betway selection for the DT38 Foundation. I've gone for West Ham to win. I think it's the first time I've actually backed us to win this season. which probably means we won't. Haller to score, backing my man. He's had a lot of stick over the last couple of weeks since we found out that Antonio was injured, and I think he's gonna prove the doubters wrong. I think because a lot of people don't think he can deputise properly for Antonio. But I'm going to stay in this corner and over 3.5 bookings. I think Fulham have had quite a few yellow cards, and if we play the way we have done over the last few weeks, then we're going to have a lot of the ball, and we might have them on the back foot a little bit and cause them a few problems going forward, which could force a few fouls in dangerous areas and a couple of bookings. So I'm backing a few yellow cards as well this week.
So for the DT38 Dylan Tombides Foundation, James Jones there, West Ham to win, Sebastian Haller to score, and more than 3.5 bookings in the game. Thomas, go on. What have you gone for this week? Last week, unfortunate. Obviously, backing West Ham to win was a bit of a bold one, but you've done the same again this week.
Yeah, I'm not sun drunk from Portugal anymore. I've been able to see things a little bit more clearly. So I've gone over 2.5 goals. I think just Premier League at the minute, there's bound to be goals with whoever's playing. Gone for West Ham to win, unsurprisingly. I'm pretty sure I've lumped that on every week now because of Chad's suggestion. And did a bit of my research, and under 8.5 corners, I don't think Fulham have been involved in a game this season where there's been more than 8 corners. So hopefully that suggests the way they set up, and that they don't actually concede any corners, because I need a win.
I like to hear that from you, Tom, doing your research before one of these bets, so you might actually win some money. For Isla's fight, of course, Tom is playing for this season, so we've got some money in the bank already across the three of us. My selections this week, I've gone for West Ham to win, and officially, James, it is the first time I've backed us this season. Normally I like to steer clear, so
we're doomed, don't we?
Yeah,
this isn't
absolutely.
Stay away, you two.
So my money, which is going towards, if it wins, Betway, of course, give us £50 per head as a charity stake to put on a West Ham bet for the weekend. And the winnings go towards the charities that me and the lads are playing for. I'm playing for the Bobby Moore Cancer Fund, and I've gone West Ham to win. Jared Bowen, goal or assist. Still in discussions with Betway whether the assist part is allowed, but it'll be Bowen goal or assist, or just a straight up goal, and a goal in each half for that. As always, the Betway selections will be available for fans to back on the Betway Bet Your Way section of their website and app around Friday of this week. But as always, we are delighted to have Craig Forrest with us, and we're still sorting out with Betway at the moment the guest stakes for this week. But Craig, I say Tony Cottee came on last week, and he unfortunately wasn't able to pull any money in. You've already injected way more positivity into the podcast than we are used to. So for your Betway charity bet for this week, we're going to ask you 3 questions. First of all, the result of the game. So West Ham win, Fulham win, or draw, please.
West Ham by 2.
West Ham, and any goal scorer from either team. So I'm assuming a West Ham one.
I'll say Haller, Sebastian.
Haller, and more or less than 8 corners in the game.
Less.
Yeah. Jumping on Tom Edwards' research then. So Craig
that.
Forrest,
Like
all 4 of us.
There'll be 20 corners, you watch.
Yeah. So Craig, just quickly, you've mentioned it there. I was going to wait till later, but it seems like a good time to bring it up. The Sebastian Haller situation. What do you make of it? Jonesy's mentioned that you got a lot of stick after Michail Antonio was injured. Antonio's played fantastically well this season. No one's arguing that he should be our number 1 striker. There are those who suggest that the recruitment of Haller was poor recruitment because he perhaps doesn't fit into the style and he was never going to. I'm just intrigued to hear what you make of the whole situation, because although he cost £45 million, I'm starting to feel a bit sorry for him, to be honest.
You know, the Premier League is a difficult league to play in, and no matter where we've seen players perform in other leagues around the world, it often is a massive change for them, and the step up or even division below the championship to the Premier League. So for Haller, he's got great experience playing around. He's got a great goal scoring record as well. Also, probably playing in teams before where he's probably getting a few more chances. So he now needs to make sure that his chances per ratio and goals ratio needs to be better. It needs to get great. And I think that he can still do it. I honestly believe that he's a player that is going to do well for West Ham, but he's going to take some time and he needs a bit of confidence, and a goal or two is certainly going to help him on his way. But he's not even close to the goal ratio that he had when he was playing in Germany, for instance.
Yeah, I just find it, Jonesy. What do you make of it? Because you're saying you're backing him this week. It's just I'm just starting to pity him because I feel sorry for him now. I know he cost 45 million quid. He doesn't pick that price tag, and he's got a lot of stick. He has put the ball in the net a few times for us. I just wonder, where do you sit?
I think a lot. I can see why a few people have dug him out a little bit and criticised him, but I'm with you, mate. I feel a little bit sorry for him. As you said, he doesn't pick his price tag. It's probably that size of price tag, 45 million quid's probably weighing on his shoulders a little bit. And he's probably equally frustrated that since he's arrived at the club, we've not really played to his strengths. We've not played in the system that he was used to playing in Germany. And we've kind of had to kind of crowbar him into the way that David Moyes wants to play. And it hasn't really worked for him. But he still has a pretty good goal record. I think it works out to be one in four, maybe just over that in terms of averages. So his goal record's good.
Not great for that price tag, though.
I mean, it's not great for the price tag. No, I completely agree. But when you consider that, particularly this season, a lot of his appearances have been off the bench, and even back into last season, he wasn't really getting a lot of starts, and he still managed to. He's still a top scorer this season. I know the bulk of his goals have come in the cup, but I think you need to put a little bit of faith in him. He's proven that he can score goals. He's a very, very good striker. And with strikers, they need to play with confidence, and he's probably a little bit out of confidence as well, I think.
I totally agree. And again, going back to changing in different leagues and how it works, we have a Canadian player that was playing in Belgium. Jonathan David got quite a big move to Lille in France. And he's 11 games in without a goal now. And he is just so tight. They gave him a penalty last time. They thought he would be able to break his duck, and he missed that as well. So confidence, like you say, is a massive thing as well, and playing in a system that you're familiar with. But I think at the end of it, they'll get there with him. It takes some time sometimes to settle into different leagues, and West Ham's also a team that's going to, not going to outchance the teams at the top half or the top six of the table very often. So taking those opportunities when they come is very important for him. But he just needs one or two to get himself going.
Guys, I'm sort of with you in the sense that also it's not a help that your manager who spends that money on you, the one who's got the balls to bring you in on that sort of money, then loses his job. Then you get Moyes in. He's found his new man up there. And Craig, you're in a better place than any of us to say, but how much does that play into the psyche of a player, sort of, when you're brought in by that manager to do a job, and then you get someone else in who sort of clearly prefers other people? He's even brought Yarmolenko to play on through the middle, and Haller sat on a bench and had to watch that happen. How much of a confidence shock is that to him, firstly? And secondly, sort of looking around and thinking, am I even wanted at this club by this manager? Is that a thing which comes into play?
Absolutely. Yeah, it does. But we have to be realistic in the world that we live in, and that managers will change over a period of time. I had, I don't know how many managers I had, 5, 6, 7 maybe, a different national team as well. So it is one part and parcel of it. Although when you look at the reasons you're brought in, who brings you in, and you're coming in with that, and then they get let go and you've been left behind a little bit. Obviously, you just got to work your ass off to get yourself back in a position where you're good enough and where the manager can't ignore you anymore, regardless of whether or not he likes you when he first comes in or not. You still have to battle through those times of adversity as a player, and make that manager, and that's your job, to give him a real hard questions about whether or not I should be playing or not. That's what you can do as a player. The rest of it is down to the manager, of course, but nothing but hard work and graft is going to get you there.
Yeah. Craig, did you ever can you think back to your career where you saw, I don't know that it ever happened to you, but whether you saw a player come into a squad that you were in for big money at the time, and the price tag just was too much for him, or it just crushed him, even though players don't pick them, Was there any time in your career you saw that happen?
I would have to think about that. But as far as they're coming in and knowing there's a player coming in, but when I was at West Ham and I was playing, I think I was in the first team at the time when there was word that there was me and Ludo there, and then Shaka Hislop was talked about coming in after the Bosman ruling thing, and Newcastle didn't think it was going to happen. They left it too long. Next thing you know, Shaka's a free, and West Ham were like, hey, we can pick him up at a decent price, certainly cheaper than we would do on the market. So then Shaka comes in. Obviously, that was fine. Shaka's a fantastic friend of mine even to this day, and so is Ludo, and most of the goalkeepers got along brilliantly well. But you also know, as an individual like myself, who was brought in really just probably cover for Ludo, and then that happens, you know that, and I was told by Les Sealy at the time, you're going to have to keep playing well and stay healthy, because as soon as you make a Rick, they're going to put Shaq in. He can't talk to the chairman of the club and bring him in for big money and think, well, why did we need a goalkeeper when he's sitting on the bench when Craig was playing well? So you kind of know the situation that you're in, and the way the business also works as well. So that plays a big part of it. But as far as people coming in big price tags, off the top of my head, I don't remember, because I never really played for clubs that could afford big price tags, and that includes West Ham. I mean,
Still does.
$1 million, right? They get $1 million for Di Canio.
Yeah.
I remember the very first training session when Di Canio came in, and nobody wanted to touch him, obviously, because of his reputation and pushing referees and whatnot. And he comes in, and the first training session, he was just like, it was magical. He was doing stuff like we saw him score off that Trevor Sinclair cross against Wimbledon. Like, he was doing that right away. Remember, Frank Sr. was standing on the other side of the pitch, and he makes this fantastic play, and Frank yells over Frank. He's like, Frank, I got myself a fucking bargain. It's true. Absolute bargain. Absolute bargain. Harry loved guys that were, I think he liked a conflict. He liked an argument. He liked a battle. He liked to get the best out of bad apples, if you like. Guys that were big characters. The Razor Ruddicks come in, and there's plenty of this and plenty of character, and dealing with the likes of John Moncur and Di Canio and Lomas, and holy crap, it was amazing. It was amazing. Yeah, and how he dealt with that really, really well, all the different characters. He did a really good job with it, and was quite happy to bring in somebody that was potentially maybe not somebody else's cup of tea, and managed to get an awful lot out of them.
Craig, how did the squad actually take to Di Canio when he first walked in? Everything that happened, obviously playing against him, he's probably nutmegged half of them before. Coming in, walking through those doors, and how was he welcomed by the squad, and how quickly did he fit in and become that main man that obviously he was for the next however long he was at the club?
Yeah, I think it was the end of his first training session.
That was long enough.
It was something else, and we saw. I wish we had video of all his training sessions, because it would have been quite good viewing for West Ham fans just to see, what he did on a daily basis at the training ground. It was incredible. But the characters of that time. And the star power when Wrighty even came, and the experience of Stuart Pearce and Winterburn, Razor Ruddock, and then also with the young up-and-comers like Rio Ferdinand, who fit in really, really well as a youngster and loved the banter, loved all that. Michael Carrick was a little quieter at that time. Joe Cole was very, very young, and some of his sessions were pretty impressive when he was 12 years old as well, beating one-on-one, taking Razor, taking Stuart Pearce, or trying to cut him apart. He was 12 years old.
12.
It was incredible. He was the best 12-year-old by far that I ever saw.
Craig, what is that like? I mean, aside from everyone listening to that will just be drooling, going, playing with Di Canio, all those names you just reeled off there. And you just said that you're still friends with Ludo and Shaka now. Obviously, you're working closely with those guys day in, day out. But is it just because we're looking back with doughy eyes that it sort of seems like football doesn't quite have that these days, where everyone, I don't know whether it's because, and you could obviously tell me if I'm wrong, whether the professionalism levels have just gone up that bit more, or is there that solid camaraderie and the joking around? Because all those characters every day in training must have been a laugh a minute.
Mm-hmm. It was. It was. I think it's, when players are living close by too, and they actually spend some time away from the park, I think is important for camaraderie too. So, also in lots of parts of London, players are scattered all over the place, and they don't really have a relationship with players outside of the training ground. That wasn't really the case, certainly with West Ham. We did a lot of things outside of the game, going out together. We really had a feel about the team that you wanted to back each other up. And you're talking about accountability earlier on. That's what it was about. There's accountability and people taking responsibilities for being on the field. And if you weren't doing your part, the rest of the team would be the ones that went after that individual. It didn't have to be the manager. The manager and Harry, that sort of part of it is really easy for some managers when you have a team of people that are willing to take people to task for their results and for their performances. That can make it easier for managers too, because of those strong characters. I think Stuart Pearce was going to, allow somebody not to run around the field. If Anil Berkovic, who is an absolutely genius of a midfield player, especially at home, but if he wasn't going to do the dog work away from home, he's going to get it in the dressing room and let him know that you're a shadow of yourself away from home, and that needs to be better. So I'm not sure that still is the same in the modern game, but I think coaches need to adapt to the modern player. I don't think players need to adapt to managers. Managers need to adapt to the modern player because they're just different, and you're not going to change them. So the way you get the best out of them is much different than it used to be back in my day. So you can say what you like as being like myself, an older player, and how we used to do it, but that's not important now. It's what they do and how you deal with the modern player as they are now and getting the best of them is a totally different world.
Craig, you mentioned about sort of accountability and everything like that. Was it the players really that held each other to account? And also, what was Harry Redknapp like in those situations? If a player had a bad game, or as you mentioned, like Berkovic didn't, only really turned up at home, didn't really do it away. Was that the players telling Berkovic, come mate, pull your finger out away from home, or was that a bit of both with the manager? Now, how was Harry Redknapp in those situations?
Yeah, well, Harry, like I said, I think he really enjoyed an argument and a confrontation with players, and whether that was Isle or John Hartson or whatever, that sort of thing. I remember a story about John Hartson and Harry. He was coming back off an injury, John, and Harry wanted him to sit on the bench. He said to him, fine, I'll sit on the bench, but can you promise me that if you put me on, takes me some time to get going, give me at least 15 minutes. So that was, Harry said, yeah, we'll do that, no problem. So the game comes and goes, and then there's 15 minutes left and 10 minutes left, and John gets up and walks down the tunnel. And then with 5 minutes left, Harry's like, all right, where's John? I'm going to put him on. And he's like, where is he? And he's looking down the sideline. He's trying to figure out where Hartson is, was he warming up? I'm going to put him on. And somebody says, he just went down the fucking tunnel. So I was on the bench, and Harry says to me, Craig, go see where Hartson is. I'm trying to put him on. I go down there. I go in the dressing room, and John's in the shower. he's like, and I'm like, John, Harry wants to put you on. He goes, you can fucking tell Harry to go fuck himself. So I said, okay. So I go out there, and Harry's like, where is he? And I went, Gaffer, he's in the shower. He said, he's in the fucking shower. So you can imagine after the game, Harry comes in, and oh my God, there was a barmy between the two of them. Like, you don't fucking care. It's like, oh my God, they were just battling back and forth all the time about him not sitting on the bench to the end of the game. He's going to fine him, and oh, geez. So this sort of thing happened all the time. But Harry, like I said, Harry was good at that. And then the players, again, they would hold themselves to account. Xhaka had a dig at Paolo, I think, away at Birmingham, I want to say, one game. And just wasn't much. It was just a constructive criticism from Xhaka. He wasn't a yeller and screamer, Xhaka.
He's a pretty laid-back guy anyway, huh?
Yeah, very, very Caribbean, yeah. and he and Paolo went fucking nuts, just lost his mind. He was throwing tea and things around, and Harry just basically, stood back and just, okay, you gotta let Paolo have his 2 minutes of just nuts, and then you'll calm down. But yeah, it wasn't so much the manager doing it as the players doing it for each other, and that made for a good dressing room.
Absolutely brilliant anecdotes from Craig Forrest there. Well, look, we've done our the Betway charity bets for this week with the Fulham game. We will talk to Joe Sansom from the Fulhamish podcast a little bit later in the show for the opposition view, but stay with us because next up we'll have more questions and anecdotes from iconic West Ham goalkeeper Craig Forrest. So Craig Forrest there with some absolutely outstanding anecdotes about his time at West Ham. I mean, what a team to have played alongside. What a load of characters. All those names Craig reeled off there. Neil Ruddock, Steve Lomas, Paolo Di Canio, Harry Redknapp in charge of that motley crew. What a great time to play. Craig, as always, like I said earlier on, we like to get the listeners involved, and we've got listeners to send a few questions in for you as we've got you on the show tonight. And this one from Mark. How did you cope with often being number 2 at times in your career? You've already mentioned, of course, Ludo and Xhaka, friends of yours still to this day, which is obviously wonderful for most of us to hear that you still have contact with those guys. But you had a spell at the club where you had some outstanding goalkeepers, goalkeepers West Ham fans look back with a great deal of fondness. Ludo McCloskey, one of the club's all-time great goalkeepers. How did you sort of deal with that? Because you've obviously still got a great fondness for your time at West Ham and for the club.
Yeah, when I first came to West Ham, obviously, and with Ludo there, I'd played against Ludic when obviously we were with Ipswich over the years and knew what an absolute quality goalkeeper he was. Good runner as well, by the way. Like one of the for a guy at 6'7" or something like that, he could run as well in long distances pretty much as good as anybody, which was a tragedy for us other goalkeepers, because when you're running around, where were we, Haino in the area, and we're running around the parks, and you got Ludo at the front of the line with all the first team players, and there's me, Xhaka, David James at the back of the line, having to have a chat with Ludo after, going, Ludo, you're killing the goalkeepers here. We're allowed to be at the back. Don't go to the friggin' front. You're killing us. Because then they start saying, hey, look at Ludo, right? I mean, unbelievable. Big freaking lungs on him. The guy, just a beast of a machine he was. So when I went to West Ham, obviously I knew that he was getting older and I might get opportunities through maybe perhaps injuries more than play, because he was just such a great goalkeeper. Although he did, when he got older, started making a few mistakes, which was completely understandable. So I just worked as hard as I could. I just wanted to get in there at least for a certain spell of time. And all you can do, like I said before, is graft, work as hard as you can, and wait for those opportunities, because they generally will come. You just don't know when they're going to come. But you have to make sure that you're ready when they do come, because that might be your only opportunity. One of the most difficult parts, I think, when I made my debut for West Ham was in the Cup against Villa at Upton Park. I was away on international duty, and I had no intention or involvement when I got back. I mean, I ended up going like from Belize or El Salvador to Belize, Houston, Los Angeles out Toronto, and then Toronto, London. That was my flight. And I got back and I was just like, didn't even know what day it was. I'm just phoning up the club and I said, I'm back. I know there's a game tonight. I'll see you next week or whatever. And they were like, no, you're playing. I was like, what? And they went, yeah, Luca went down in training. He's done a calf. You got to play. So I was like, just sideways, didn't know what day it was. I ended up going straight to Upton Park and playing in the game. It was one of the only games that I actually don't remember anything, except we did win the game about it. And the most worrying thing about that situation was you want to be at your very best, physically, mentally, everything, when you get those opportunities. And it doesn't always work that way. I was in a terrible state and it was my debut, but if I had made mistakes, the fans don't care that you travel. They don't know the situation. They could care less. They just want you to perform when you show up. So there's pressures like that, and just expecting the unexpected sometimes. But try to be as ready as you can. But even at that, you just never know when those chances are going to come up, when those opportunities are going to arise, and you just better try to grind through it and do the best you possibly can.
Craig, you've already mentioned your relationship with Ludo and Shaka, but how much is the goalkeepers union actually a thing, and how important is it as a goalkeeper, as a second, first choice, whatever it is, to actually have that relationship with the other keepers? Because presumably majority of your days spent training with them, you spend a lot of time with them.
Right.
And how much does that actually mean? Does it make a difference or not at all? Is it competition when you're in, and just a little bit of a help, or is it massively important to have that with the other keepers?
Well, it's such a different position, obviously, and it's not like it's not objective because it's not like you're golfing and whatever your score is your score. It might be about opinions and about who's better and who's worse and who's in better fitness and who's better game ready, and all these different things come into play. But as a goalkeeper, when you play for a while, you do understand that it has nothing to do with the personality of the goalkeeper that you're training with. And they know that about you too. And they know it's not down to our decisions and whether I like him or I like him or not. And that tended to, make for a good atmosphere around training. There's no point in not liking the other guy unless he's just a dick. But other than that, there's no point in it. And generally, they were good guys, really good guys. From guys I played with Richard Wright at Ipswich when he was a young lad as well, ended up moving into the first team and went to Arsenal, to goalkeepers like David James, who was a bit of a stronger character that way, was pretty, not a loner, but certainly wanted to keep himself to himself and went in training and left, whatnot. But the rest of them really were quite close on and off the field. Ludo was impossible not to like. Shaka, the same thing. Bernard Lamb was a bit of a different cat when he came over, and the situation that he came over with too was odd.
What a name! What a name!
Yeah,
I
I
love things like that. Just names like that who come across. And I used to love Bernard Lamar. I say it to all my friends now. If we're talking about Rogue, we used to do a thing on this podcast called the Rogue Mystery Players Quiz, and we'd give 3 clues on random West Ham players. And Bernard Lamar was one of my favourite answers. Played for Paris Saint-Germain, didn't he? The real good goalkeeping pedigree, and somehow turns up as West Ham's number 2.
The reason why he came to West Ham was I'm not sure about his club situation at that time, if he was banned or what, but he needed a club and he needed to be playing because he wanted to be in the 98 squad for France, which he ended up being. I think he was number 2 to Barthez during that World Cup. But he needed to play. So he was a guy that he wasn't like the other goalkeepers coming in. He was coming in and he needed to play. So he was constantly knocking at Harry's door. I got to be playing. I got to be playing. Not because of West Ham or whether he thought the other goalkeeper. He just needed to. He was going to do whatever he could to get in that team, to get some playing time, to get some exposure from the French national team. Very, very different. Yeah, very different out of any of the situations. He was there for a short term and a short time, and he knew it was going to be that case as well. So he was going to do as well as he possibly could to get himself into that team one way or the other.
Love it.
I know you've already given us some cracking stories about Paolo Di Canio, but I can't help but not ask you about that most iconic moment. You were in the starting 11 when he scored that goal against Wimbledon. What was that like to, one, see live on the pitch, but also what was the atmosphere in the changing room like afterwards?
I'd never seen a stadium go from, subdued. I mean, the ball was being moved around midfield, and Steve Lomas had made an overlap around Trevor Sinclair. And I remember one of the conversations after the game was, because Lomi, when he passed around Sinclair for the overlap, he wanted the ball. He just run 60 yards. He wanted the ball. So when he saw, he was looking over his shoulder, he saw Sinclair going to hit the cross to Paolo, and he's literally fucked him off. He's just like he's like, what the fuck? Like, yeah, almost like, let me in, right? Like, knocks his ball across to Di Canio, and then the rest is history. So a lot of that was just laughing about the fact that Lomi was so angry that he didn't get the overlap pass than it was for the cross, and then all of a sudden Di Canio hits it. It was like, okay, not bad. The stadium went from that just quiet, subdued, to an explosion that I've never ever heard or seen before or since. Well,
Do you
actually,
do-
maybe since I was at the Toronto Raptor game in the NBA last year when Kawhi Leonard hit a buzzer beater against Philadelphia 76ers, and that was probably the other time.
Bounce on the rim. Is it when it bounced on the rim and just flopped in?
That's right. Hit the rim about 4 or 5 times, and that was the other thing. The whole stadium went quiet, and you could actually hear the ball hit the rim. And then when it went in, it was just, I think my ears exploded. But it was very similar to that. And you just knew you'd seen something incredibly special. And like I said, in training, it wasn't something that we didn't see on a regular basis. It wasn't a surprise. It wasn't a shock. We were very, very used to seeing the skills of Paolo Di Canio.
Absolutely. Look, Craig, before we let you go, it seems you, the same as everyone or most players who were at West Ham during that time, formed an instant bond with each other, the club and the fans. And I think certainly listeners to the We Are West Ham podcast, as much as me and the lads, I've absolutely loved talking to you tonight just to hear what that was like, because fans still have a real connection to that time. They'll be absolutely delighted when they tune into the podcast this week to hear that we've got you on. It's a nice surprise for all of them. We'll certainly hope to have you on again. But just before you go, if there's one thing that sort of stands out, or one anecdote from your time at West Ham, whether it sums up what it was like to be at the club, or just the funniest thing that happened when you were there, what give us one more tale before we let you go.
Okay, well, I was hoping John was going to be on today because there was a chance he was going to be on. And I wanted to talk to him about this, and he might have brought it up with you guys before. But he showed up at training a few times, and Eddie Gillens, the kit man that was there for years, is an absolute legend. He was missing either a sock or shorts, because remember, us players are pampered like you never known. All your stuff is laid out for you. You don't have to make any freaking decisions yourself. It's just perfect, right? So he comes in, and he's day after day, there's something missing. So he comes in late one day for training. We were already outside running, and it was miserable, raining, 5 degrees. John comes in, and I guess his kid isn't there at all. So he just puts his boots on and nothing else. And you can never get away with that now because cameras everywhere, right? I mean, there was a certain amount. There was always a handful of fans, even if the weather was that bad, would stand there in the parking lot and watch. But he comes out, he's butt naked, got absolutely not a stitch on except his boots. Does the whole warm up in 5 degrees. Harry's just standing there shaking his head, just can't understand what is going on, doing all the leg kicks and everything else. And then when he goes, he said, I better go put some clothes on because he's freezing. And as he runs in front of the fans, he does this swan dive right through a pond, like a puddle right in front of him, slides right, absolutely naked. And I think he went home, and I don't think we saw him for 4 days because I think he caught something. He ended up really sick, friggin' pneumonia or something.
Absolutely fun.
I got so many John stories, and Di Canio, I'll tell one more about him. You probably heard this one. Have you heard the one on the plane where he had the plane actually abort? Well, anyway,
we may have done, but tell it again. Tell it again. You will never get old.
I was about, I don't know, a third of the way up the plane. We're flying up to Newcastle, I think, and we taxi right to the end of the runway. We're ready to go, and the stewardess is sitting there looking down the aisle of the plane, and she's like, Sir, excuse me, you have to sit down. We can't take off. I look behind, and there's Paolo coming up the middle of the aisle. No, I've had a dream. I want off. And anyway, then the pilot comes on. He's like, sir, we're actually ready to take off. Sit down. And Harry's like, Paolo, sit the fuck down, you fucking maniac. He doesn't sit down. He wants off. He will not sit down. So we have to taxi back to the gate, lose our spot. We're delayed, I don't know how long. Let him off with one of the directors who had to get in a car and drive him all the way to Newcastle. And that was the end of that, except everybody's on the plane going, these crazy people like Paolo, there's something to him as well. I hope he's, the dream he had, I hope he's not right. He was so scared of flying. He was the only guy that made me terrified of flying was Paolo. If you sat next to him, my hands would sweat because he was just terrified. Every little bump on the plane, he would be almost screaming. So.
What a man, what a story, and what a period of West Ham history. I think one which almost all fans who were around at the time and can remember it look back on with utter fondness. Well, look, Craig, we did try and get you on tonight for the reunion with John Moncur, and we 100% will do that in the next few weeks. Technical issues letting us down this evening, unfortunately, but it's been an absolute pleasure.
It wasn't technical issues. It was John.
Well,
when I heard this was
than me.
When I heard it was going to be more than just audio, I was like, "Oh, this is going to be problems for John."
Well, you're his former teammate, so we'll let you hang him out to dry. We still want him on our side. So, but I definitely speak for myself, certainly, and I'm sure for the lads. But it's been a genuine pleasure to have you on. Those anecdotes are worth their weight in gold. It's been brilliant to hear your thoughts on the game against Liverpool at the weekend. Fulham coming up. Fingers crossed we can win some money with the Betway charity bets. But Craig Forrest, thank you so much for coming on to the We Are West Ham podcast for the first time. We sincerely hope that it is not the last, and we will get you on for that reunion with John Moncur soon. But stay with us, because next up we've got Fulham podcaster Joe Sansom from the Fulhamish podcast to look ahead to this weekend's game. Craig Forrest there in what I think might be my favourite We Are West Ham interview of all time. Absolutely brilliant to hear from Craig there, dialing in from Toronto with some absolutely priceless anecdotes about Paolo Di Canio, Harry Redknapp, Neil Ruddock, John Moncur, and all the rest of them. And we will certainly be getting Craig back on in the coming weeks and hopefully make that reunion that he was planning with John Moncur happen on the We Are West Ham podcast in the coming weeks. Craig gave us his thoughts and had a tipple on the Betway charity bets on the Fulham game coming up this weekend. And ahead of that game, Saturday night at London Stadium, 8 o'clock kickoff, we are delighted to welcome Joe Sansom from the Fulhamish podcast for our opposition view segment to look ahead to the game. Joe, thanks very much for joining us. We do appreciate it. A brilliant win for you boys at the weekend. First win of the season, a huge one against what already looked like relegation rivals West Brom. That's a big monkey to get off your back. I'm assuming you're absolutely thrilled that, to get that one in the bag.
Yeah, and cheers for having me on. Yeah, I was really nervous for the game yesterday. Probably the most nervous, other than the playoffs, that I've been for a league game in a long, long time. Like, it really felt like if we didn't win, then we're already looking up against it. We look up against it as it is. And it was really important that we could pull ourselves out of the relegation zone, even if it's quite early on. I think, psychologically, it's quite a boost, because everyone said, from Jamie Carragher saying he was more certain we're going down than he was of anything in his life, I think was the phrase. I think it's feeling a bit more positive now, and we really looked a lot better yesterday. We were much improved going forward and at the back, and hopefully it's a sign of things to come.
Joe, with obviously a bit of a West Ham connection with Scott Parker in charge, we probably all love him, obviously, with what he did with us. But what is the feeling with Fulham fans? Because obviously I spoke to Dom in some parts of the season last year. He wasn't too sold on him. But how are you guys all feeling about him now? And how far do you think he can take you? Because he seems like a really energetic, positive manager, and somebody who could take you quite far.
Yeah, I mean, I was quite similar to Dom. It was quite mixed last season. And there were times last season where I was thinking, I'm not sure he's quite cut out for this yet. I thought that tactically, in particular before lockdown, it often didn't seem like he was too tactically aware. But I think he's come a long way since then. And I think it's very clear that he's learning as he goes along. And I always said that I think the style of football he plays, when we take the lead, under him, we haven't ever lost a game. In the Championship and this season as well. And when we take the lead, he sets us up very well to defend that, which is something that we're not very good at defensively. We've been quite shaky for a number of years, going back to when we were even a solid Premier League team. At the back end of that, we were very shaky defensively. And he's got a passing style of football with a bit of grit. Quite similar to him as a player, I guess. He's got very high standards, and I really liked him as a player for us. So he obviously played for you before he played for Spurs, and then he came to us from Spurs, and he was getting on a bit at that point, but he stuck around with us when we went down, and captained us in the Championship when it was really looking like we might go down to League One. And I really think that he can go far as a manager. I still think he's learning. I don't think he's like finished article at all. But yesterday, I think he outthought Slaven Bilic. And last season, one of my complaints about him was that I thought he got outthought by Slaven Bilic twice. So that's an improvement.
Oh, a couple of years ago, when you were last in the Premier League, Fulham spent, was it 100 million quid in the summer, and it massively backfired. And this year, there's still a lot of transfer activity in and around Craven Cottage, but a lot less spent. I mean, what are your thoughts on Fulham's transfer window and business, both in and out? Do you think it was a lot more thought out than a couple of years ago when you last came up?
Yeah, I definitely think it's an improvement. I'm satisfied by the players we brought in for sure. I still think that we maybe could have done with another forward, because at the moment it's really Mitrovic or no one. I thought we could have done with another backup for him. The only complaint I had, and it was quite a big one, but it was just that we took a long time to bring in the defenders that we really obviously needed. So we went from the centre backs that aren't good enough. We brought in 2 on deadline day, and then we brought in Congolo in the domestic window deadline day as well. I think it was tough because obviously everyone's saying, "Oh, don't spend the money, don't spend the money." We know what happened last time, but at the same time, our team was not good enough. Like, we finished 4th in the Championship. We had a good season, but it wasn't like the Leeds team, or I'm thinking back to like the Sheffield United team last year, where it was almost a Premier League team in waiting. There was a lot of players that you think might not be able to make the step up, and didn't make the step up last time. So I think it was tough. I think we got there in the end, but my complaint would be that I don't think we brought in the defenders quick enough. And that could cost us with a few of the games where we put in some terrible performances at the start of the season. In particular, the Villa game, which was quite an embarrassing defensive performance. Last night was the first time we saw our new 2 centre-backs together. And in fact, it was a whole back 5, including the goalie. None of them played for us last year. I think I'm thinking maybe there was 2 players in the starting 11, maybe 3, that were playing for us last year, which shows the difference. But touch wood, I think we had a better window than we did in 2018.
Joe, can I ask you a question? And this, we will go on to how we think the game's going to go at the weekend. But I find Fulham a really bizarre football club. So can I just ask how?
Get him.
No, I just think they're unique. There's lots of clubs up and down the land that are pretty run of the mill. Do you know what I mean? West Ham are one of a few, like, big rowdy, and not just the fact you've got a house in the corner of your stadium and a rowing club and the river the other side. But how did you start supporting Fulham? Just explain that to me, because I always found it weird that the away followings were always reasonably small when we were when you're in the Premier League, sort of when Lewis Barmorta and Papa Bouba Diop were playing for you. I always found it confusing. I had my season ticket at West Ham, and I always took a real interest in away support and away followings. And the Fulham was always quite small, and I used to find that confusing because you were only the other end of the district line. So how did you start supporting Fulham? Yeah,
well, I started supporting Fulham in primary school. One of my best friends invited me to a Fulham game with his dad, and my mum came with me as well. I'd already been to one when I was very young that I couldn't really remember. Started going a few times, and I just loved it.
Are you from around that area?
Yeah, I'm from Wimbledon. So my closest Premier League club is Fulham. Yeah. Ironically, Wimbledon, their new stadium, which they're playing in tonight when we're recording this, is literally right by my house. So obviously, if I was born now, that would be my local club. I still think I'd pick Fulham because my friends supported them, and I always went to games with my dad, just sort of the local club, really. and then I got a season ticket with my dad, and we just started going every week and just loved it. And the small away crowds it always sort of got me down a little bit because obviously you'd love to have a big crowd, but in a way I'm sort of glad that the people that do go to the games, it means a lot to every single person there. And the crowds are, I mean, we probably would have seen it this season. The crowds have slowly been getting better over the years, especially since I first started going, and you just know everyone there. And
Even at the home games.
yeah, exactly. And yeah, I mean, I think it's quite tough with. Obviously, it's tough for all clubs in London because there's so many. But when you've got Chelsea around the corner, you've also got QPR, who are always been, I mean, a smaller club, but of a similar size. Brentford not too far away as well. I can see why it is harder. But I definitely think the fan base is growing, and it's good that we're getting a new stand at the moment when you play us, whenever the home game is, will hopefully be a lot better, because at the moment where the camera is, when it's looking down on the touchline, it's like you're looking off a cliff, because there's nothing there, and then there's just the river, so they haven't really got anywhere to put it at the moment.
No, you'll have to forgive me that one, because I just find I always sort of wonder how one ever ends up supporting in Fulham. But I'm sure Tom will have a sensible question about how you think the weekend's going to go. But I just thought, well, I've got you on, I might as well ask.
I'm outnumbered, so there's nothing I can do.
Exactly, your back's against the wall, Joe. He usually is the case with that man. Don't forget him. But this season, you spent a bit on the back four. Obviously, you brought Hector in last year. It always felt whenever you've recently been in the league, whether that be the year you got relegated, then came up, or whatever it is, it's always felt you're the type of team who teams can have a serious go at, and there's going to be goals in that game, and more likely than not, away from home, you're going to struggle. Do you think you've done anything to allay those fears, or to actually make you a more solid team? You say when you're in the lead, and you kept that clean sheet the other night, but is it something that Fulham fans are still worried about? Because ultimately, if you keep clean sheets, you'll stay in the league.
Yeah, it's definitely the weak point of the team still. I don't think we've suddenly solved it. We played well yesterday, and since we got quite convincingly beaten by Villa, we've been a lot better defensively in all the games. Even the ones we've lost, it's been by the odd goal. It's not been anywhere near as convincing. But now we've got our two new centre-backs in. So we've got Adarabioyo, who's come from Man City, and we've got Anderson, who's on loan from Lyon. He played for the first time yesterday. And he's a player that's played in the Champions League before. He's clearly a level above what we had. I mean, Hector's, I know you said Hector there. Hector's a really weird one, because I don't know how much you saw of us in the Championship last season.
I said that because last year he looked like he came on, because I saw him at Reading, came on leaps and bounds last year, but he hasn't taken.
Yeah, exactly. He basically, the move fell through last minute in the summer, as in we just didn't quite get it done. So he trained with us till January. As soon as he stepped onto the pitch in January, it was like a different team, so much more solid at the back. And then he just hasn't made the step up for whatever reason. In the games he played, he looked very much out of his depth, and I think it's something that the fans definitely didn't expect it, but I think the board didn't expect it either, because after that it went very much from we need to sign a centre-back to we need to sign two centre-backs, which is obviously very harsh, but I think that sentimentality, it sounds harsh, but it's only going to get you so far. I think that these players that served us so well in the Championship, both times we've come up, are just not good enough, some of them, especially the defenders. But no, to answer your question, I think we've turned a corner and our defence has improved. I mean, I don't think we're quite there yet, but I think it's definitely getting better.
So let's switch attention to this weekend's game. Fulham without a win in the last 11 visits to West Ham, both Upton Park and London Stadium. Do you see any way of that changing? Obviously, West Ham on the back of a defeat at the weekend, in relatively good form, but that win for you guys on Monday night, taking a lot of confidence into a stadium that West Ham is still effectively, we're still trying to find our feet in that ground, although we have been relatively good this season. How do you think the game's going to go?
Yeah, I think it should be a good game, because I'm a lot more confident now after watching us yesterday. and watching us recently, I think we've played better away from home this season. We haven't always got the results to come away with it, but all 3 games we played away from home have been quite tight. We took Leeds all the way, we took Wolves all the way, and then we were unlucky not to win at Sheffield United. And yeah, I think it'll be a good game. I think it's going to be a tough game, and I would definitely take a point if I was offered it now. I think it's simple. If you win your home games and draw your away games, you should stay up. And I've always sort of believed in that. I'm confident. I mean, I hope he's still out. With all due respect to him, I hope he gets better soon. But Antonio being out must be quite a big miss. But then I know Ben Rama quite well from last year. I know Bowen quite well from last year because he tore us a new one at the Cottage, and
Still scarred from that one by the looks of it.
That was one of the worst I've ever seen, because that was a whole team that were pretty crap. But they had Bowen and they had Grzycki, that's now West Brom, and they were lightning, so quick. So yeah, I'm nervous for the game. I'm confident that we can get something, but we'll have to defend as well as we did yesterday to do that. And yeah, I mean, you've been playing quite well, because I looked at your fixtures at the start of the season. I was like, oh my God, I'm glad we haven't got their start. But it seems to me that you've done a lot better than you. Well, I don't want to speak for you, but probably a lot better than you've expected with those games. And even the Liverpool one, I mean, 2-1. I mean, those Liverpool and Man City games, you normally see them as a bit of a write-off in recent years, and got a point, was it, against City?
Yeah, we're point against City, and then just narrowly lost. And you've that's the exact tone of the podcast so far, Joe. Obviously, we are 14th. We've only got one more win than you have, but like you say, the games that we've had were pretty grim. So to have 8 points from those 7 games, when we were genuinely predicting that we may end up with 0 to 2 points from these games, I think we're all pretty pleased with that. But Joe, we'll put you on the spot now, because there's been a little bit of a surprising tone of confidence among me and the boys going into this week's game. It's not a tone we usually hear. Craig Forrest joined us from Toronto to inject a bit of unseen positivity on the We Are West Ham podcast. Me and the lads in our charity bets this week have all backed West Ham wins, which again is unlikely. So there's confidence from us, but let's get a score prediction from you before we let you go.
I'll go with 1-1 for this one. I'm feeling more confident than I would have been a few weeks ago, and hopefully we can get something, because we've got City and Liverpool coming up.
Absolutely.
The international break, so it'll be good to get another point on board.
Well, that's the first opposition view in 5, I think, that hasn't predicted a win for their own team. So we could see a change in our fortunes. Thomas Edwards, what's your score prediction for this weekend?
It's on my bet. I just fancy us. I think 2-1. I think they're a good side. We can't mug them off. That they'll certainly cause problems. But 2-1, I'm confident that we'll carry the form over enough just to pip it.
James Jones, a little bit of cautious optimism from Tom Edwards there. Are you feeling the same?
I'm a little bit more optimistic. I'm going to go 3-1 West Ham.
3-1 West Ham, even though our main strikers out. Absolute bold predictions from James Jones there. I don't know. And I'm a bit fed up with my, negative persona that comes across sometimes on this podcast when guessing or predicting West Ham results. I'm sort of inclined to go with Joe, because I just think going forward that it's going to be a bit blunt. I think the Haller situation is going to prove a bit of a thorn in our side again, but I don't want to do that. So I'm going to say we'll nick an ugly 1-0, but I think we'll win the game. But Joe, thanks very much for joining us tonight. 1-1 from Joe Sansom from the Fulhamish podcast. Cautious optimism from Tom Edwards, and all-out rampant thrashing, according to James Jones this weekend. But stay with us, because you might be in for another thrashing with James Jones in the hot seat for Name That Game, which is coming up next. You are still listening to the We Are West Ham podcast with me, Will Pugh, James Jones and Tom Edwards. And that was Joe Sansom from the Fulhamish podcast then. Cautiously optimistic that his team could get a point. Joe opting for 1-1 there. I can't see it being a big free scorer, but I just think it's such a huge game, lads, because this is the first one of those winnable games, isn't it? The 14th, the feeling of positivity and all that sort of stuff will quickly go away, won't it? If we lose this game at the weekend, or even if we draw, really, against everyone's considering them as relegation fodder. And I know they've got a win last time out, but it was only against the second worst team other than them in the league, wasn't it? In West Brom. So I think massive one. And I think you know what it's like. Sporting West Ham, the pressure all of a sudden from fans will mount back on the team if we don't get anything this weekend, and all of a sudden those 8 points that we'll have from those 8 games won't quite look as rosy after all. But Jonesy, talking of points returns, you've got a very healthy one in Name That Game this year, 16 points, and Tom Edwards, you're on 9 and I'm bottom of the table on 7. But Jonesy, you are the quizmaster this week. Each week the quizmaster picks a West Ham match from history, collates 7 necessary pieces of information, an obscure fact on the game, the score line, an opposition goal scorer if there are any, a West Ham goal scorer if there are any, the stadium in which the game was played, West Ham's opponent, and the season. The tie break is, of course, the year the game took place. Commanding lead from you at the moment, Jonesy, but you are quizmaster this week, so no opportunity for you to get any points. It's all down to me and Tom. Straight into it.
Yeah, let's do it. It's a good chance for you guys to start catching me out this week. So, yeah, I'm quite happy to have the week off and ask the questions.
Go for it.
Give us a chance here. Come on.
Yeah, so obscure fact is in this game, this game brought the West Ham manager's first ever win over the opponents that day in 16 attempts in his career.
What a clue that is.
I'm going to guess 1-0.
That is correct.
Oh,
That is correct.
No way. What is he talking about? What is he?
Right, Tom, you got to give an opposition goal scorer.
What opposite? None.
Correct.
That's the best point I've ever had.
Oh,
That's the best point I've ever had.
What a joke that is.
So Will, you need a West Ham goal scorer, please.
I'm going to go with Andy Carroll.
That is incorrect.
That throws over to Tom.
Tom?
Oh, I'm thinking it. Mark Noble.
Incorrect.
Oh, blimey. All right, next one then, Jonesy.
So next one is stadium.
I'm going to go Upton Park.
That is correct.
Phew. 2-1, Tom for
Opponent.
the opponent.
Oh, I think I'm in the money here. Is it Arsenal?
It is incorrect.
Oh!
Will?
I'm going to go Manchester United.
That is correct.
Oh, back of the netto.
Against United.
Oh,
So
get in there.
That makes it, by my calculation, 3-1.
Yeah, that is the win for me this week.
To Will. So, yeah.
Tom's got an opportunity to grab a point back with the season.
Oh, do me a favour. 12-13.
No, you're miles out. Incorrect.
Miles out.
Will?
I'm miles out of this game.
Oh dear. All right, hang on.
Come on.
Oh, I know it.
0809?
No, that is incorrect.
I think I got it. Do I get another sniff at it?
No, you do not, as per the rules. Go on then, Jonesy.
Try to creep in.
So the game, the manager was actually Alan Kirbishley.
Yeah.
in his first game as West
Rio
Ham United
Coca.
manager.
Rio
Rio
Coca.
Coca winner. It was his first game as West Ham manager, and he got his first ever win in his entire managerial career against Man United. In the 2005-2006 season, Rio Coca scored the winner.
That was
And,
in when? 05, 06? 06, 07,
06,
surely.
07, sorry. 06, 07, yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah,
That's a good one. That threw me off. That completely threw me off considering I knew the game. That's good.
Well, that was when Rio Coca cupped his ear to the fans, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah.
He scored at the Bobby Moore end, didn't he? Just to tap him.
Yeah, he'd been getting a load of grief, hadn't he? And that was that was an odd one. But so that's 3-1 to me as far as the scores go, Jonesy. That makes things a little bit more interesting at the bottom of the table, does it?
Yeah. So Will, you got the 3 points. That brings you up to 10. Tom's solitary point also brings him to 10. So neck and neck, just underneath.
Jones, I'll be texting you the game
16.
next week, so he doesn't get a point.
Yeah, I do vividly remember that because there was quite a lot of negativity around Kirbishley's appointment, wasn't there? Things weren't going well at the moment. United had a great team then, and Rio Coca. I seem to remember like him coming out as if he'd been getting loads of stick, and I remember thinking at the time I didn't think he'd been getting that much of a hard time. But and then he sort of ran along giving it all that, didn't he? For those who are watching on YouTube, cupping his ear to the Bobby Moore end.
I'm just looking at the BBC Sport match report for that game, and I've got some quotes from Kirbishley after, and he specifically says there's been a lot of criticism of the players, and they've got to answer that and face the music. And then looking back, I mean, I think it doesn't. I don't think it wasn't just Rio Coca. It was the majority of the squad were getting a lot of stick, given the form, but.
Yeah, because they were rubbish.
Yeah, and that win didn't even get us out of the bottom three at the time. And, don't forget we had Carlos Tevez and Mascherano in the squad. Yeah. And we were still battling relegation. So it's no wonder the players were getting a little bit of grief from the fans.
Yeah, no, that's a good one, that, Jones. Yeah, I like that. And you know what, as well, when you said that, the first clue about the first win in however many, I was still thinking Moyes. I thought it was Moyes for ages.
I was just umming and ahhing whether to give away the manager or not, but then I thought, no, that will give away the game if I say that it was Kirbishley's first win over the opponent. So I thought I'd keep it a little bit more mysterious.
I thought Allardyce hurt Pardew. When you said Carroll, I thought Will knew the game. So here we go. Anyway,
Tom Edwards absolutely furious with his performance in Name That Game once again. Josie, I still don't know how you managed to get to 16 points. Did you have an absolute rout one week?
I have a route most weeks.
He had two routes.
I think I've lost one, and out of what, 4, 5, 3.
Must be it. I think you've done pretty well to get to 16 points. Yeah, exactly. Well, look, James Jones on 16, me and Tom Edwards on 10 points each at the bottom of the Name That Game quiz there. West Ham 1, Manchester United 0, Nigel Rio Coca giving it large to the Bobby Moore end, even though he was captain of a team in the bottom 3 of the Premier League. But stay with us, because next up we'll be talking about another team who's in serious trouble at the moment. It's the West Ham women. So a comprehensive victory for me, Will Pugh, on the Name That Game quiz. They're delighted to finally get some points on the board. And one team who have been struggling to get points on the board recently is the West Ham women's team. Not a lot has changed since we last spoke. Last week's show, of course, we did the international roundup, the players back and in training after their trips, or various trips, all over the world. Lockdown has, of course, come in, but women's football, of course, the elite level is going to carry on just as the men's game is. And the women's next game is tomorrow night. We record this, of course, on a Tuesday evening. The next game is Reading at home next up in the League Cup Wednesday evening. The girls had a bit of respite, didn't they, Jonesy, when they beat Brighton on penalties in the last round of this cup competition. A little bit of a positive injection. People hoped that would carry over into their league form. It didn't, but certainly an opportunity for the girls to get back to winning ways tomorrow.
Absolutely. I mean, Reading are they're having a bit of a sort of inconsistent season so far in the league, and you have to think that anything other than a win here for the team is going to just plough even more uncertainty and even more sort of lack of confidence into the squad league going into league games at the weekend. And they're in real trouble. This does give them a little bit of break from league form. It's a one-off game, won the last one on penalties, as you said. So if they're going to get any more confidence and start actually get their season up and running, then this is the game to do it and beat a half decent Reading side. There's no better way of getting your team back on track than winning in the cup against a team above you in the league, and then going from there and building on that.
Yeah, having beaten Brighton already obviously gives there is a chance to have a decent cup run there, and hopefully the girls carry on that tomorrow. Tom, it's Birmingham away next up though in the WSL, back in the league, where that's really the bread and butter, and that's where the girls need to start up in the ante a little bit. Some pictures being posted online in the week of the girls, in training and working hard in the gym, all that usual sort of stuff. All of those things are all very well. Needs to convert to points. It's the same sort of stuff that we've been saying the last few weeks. It's more important than ever, really, because like we have mentioned before, it's a relegation battle. If they don't get a win, it's on the 8th of November is the Birmingham game. Birmingham away. Birmingham again, 7th in the WSL. That's Sunday's game. Is it too early for phrases like must win?
Sadly, I actually don't think so. And I think with the standard in the WSL these days, that every team is a serious danger, and they've got each team has top players who can cause you problems. And being cut adrift at the bottom of the league and in a pack of about 3 or 4 after 10 games leaves you basically fighting for your life. So the quicker the girls get points on the board, the better. And I think Brighton, albeit there's no points at stake and it's a cup game, I think it's an important game for them to go out there, without sounding like every Sunday league manager that we all know, saying winning breeds winning. It really does. And if you get a win there and you roll over and you go to Birmingham with a bit of confidence, it can make a world of difference. And we've seen it on the documentary. We've heard the journalists who've come on here and speak about it. The girls have a problem about getting on each other's backs. And it seems like when the going gets tough, they sort of get on each other's backs. So if you get a win and you relieve a bit of pressure, then who knows? And Birmingham are a side that decent side and they play some decent stuff, but we can absolutely go there and get something. It's just about actually showing up and giving the best version of the girls that they have this season, because I don't feel like we've actually played our best all season, bar once or twice in patches against Arsenal. I know we lost that 9-1, but we had a moment where we looked like a really good side. So show that form and there's no reason we can't go there and get a result.
True. I can only imagine what it must be like having you as a Sunday league manager though, Tom.
Hell.
Yeah, I would just imagine it's cliche after cliche.
Yeah.
I bet if you've heard it's still 0-0 lads once, you've heard it a million times.
We'll win this half, 4-0 down. Come on, lads, win this half.
Wins behind this half, lads. We're downhill.
Yeah.
We're downhill. Absolutely ridiculous stuff. But look, I say, hopefully next week it'll be a little bit more of a positive chat for the West Ham women. 2 big games coming up between now and next week's podcast. Reading at home in the League Cup tomorrow night, Wednesday, the 4th of November, before Birmingham away in the WSL on Sunday, the 8th. 2 huge games for the girls. Focus should definitely be on that league game to claw themselves away from the relegation zone in the WSL. But stay with us, because we'll have some final thoughts from the lads on what has been one of my favourite ever We Are West Ham episodes, and that outstanding interview with iconic West Ham goalkeeper Craig Forrest. So we're at that stage of the show again, right at the end. We've done all 6 segments on the We Are West Ham podcast. An absolutely brilliant one tonight. What an honour to speak to Craig Forrest, all the way from Toronto in Canada, iconic West Ham goalkeeper. Brilliant to hear from Craig. Of course, we heard from Joe from the Fulhamish podcast. Look ahead to Saturday night's game with Fulham at the London Stadium. And brilliant stuff, James. Bit nervous times for the women's team, of course. But as we always do at the end of the show, we'll do our Fantasy Premier League update. Jonesy, have you got the... Actually, no, Tom, I'll throw to you first. Just update us on the scores between the three of us. I had another pretty average week myself on Fantasy Premier League, 52 points, and the overall global average was 53. Nothing spectacular. Kane captain, he scored for me. I don't know where that puts me overall compared to the two of you, because I wasn't actually keeping an eye on it this weekend.
So sadly, Will, you are top with 371 total points. I am second with 351, and Jonesy's 5 behind on 346. So it's a pretty close league, which makes it exciting. But I think Jonesy got 40 this week. I got 49. You got 52. So we all need to have a good hard look at ourselves and work out what's going wrong, because one of those weeks again. But at least it's tight between us. There's something to play for.
I say I didn't keep an eye on it. I must have at some point, because I did have a quick look at Jonesy's team. I was wetting myself laughing when he was on about 36 points when most of his players had played. And I listened back to last week's pod, James, and you didn't sound happy, and you look even less happy this week.
You don't look happy.
I'm not happy about it, if I'm honest. So I had a little look back over the last seven game weeks. And I think in only 2 of them, my captain has either scored or assisted once. The rest of the time, blank every week. And Son, I washed my hands of him. Home to Brighton.
Yeah.
He scored against us. He scored about 900 against Southampton a few weeks ago. He even banged in a few at Old Trafford for fun. Home at Brighton, can't even score or assist. I washed my hands of him, and it's ruined my season so far. I've got no time for it anymore.
And you're actually bottom out of the three of us as well, which is good. Tom,
which is what I'm annoyed about, by the way.
Yeah,
that's the only reason why I'm annoyed.
It's pretty poor form, isn't it? When all three of us, the little mini league we set up just so we know how we all stand in comparison to each other. I got less than the global average, and I still topped the table between the three of us this week. Tom, are you sort of feeling pretty similar to Jonesy?
I mean, I'm as it stands. I'm not here to have a go at anyone, but I absolutely hate Son at the best of times. And last week when he got more points, I was like, it's either I hate him or I hate him and he gets me FPL points. So I drag him in this week, and same as 2 points, mate. Excellent. I've had Arnold in there since game 1. I think he's got 1 clean sheet. He gets a booking every other week.
I'm binning Alexander Arnold.
He's doing my head in. I think after the international break, I'm going to have to come out with some new ideas, get a wild card out there, and try and make something happen, because Pew, you're definitely in sight, mate. 20 points is nothing.
It's not massive, is it? But I'm definitely binning Alexander Arnold this week. I saved up a transfer, so there's a double him and Pulisic, who I just kept faith with from the beginning of the season, thinking he was going to be the new Hazard this year, and because the first bit of his name sounds like my surname. But no, Alexander Arnold and Pulisic out for me this week. Jonesy, how does the overall We Are West Ham Fantasy League look? So all the listeners can join on CNY60U is the Fantasy Premier League code if you want to join. I think you still can. How's that looking at the moment? I think Rudy Eagling was top last Monday when we recorded the pod with Tony Cotti. How's it looking now?
And Rudy Eagling still tops the league. Consistency in a good way, as opposed to my inconsistency. Rudy Eagling's Moyes' Mavericks still tops the league by 19 points. It's a nice little cushion at the top there. 65 points this week for Rudy. Paul Melton close behind on 470. But there's that top 4. I'm looking at it now. There's in 4th, you've got Josh Bragg with 450. Then there's another 10-point jump to Mark Anderson in 3rd. And there's just 10 points, and then the 19 points between 1st and 2nd. So that top 4 beginning to pull away a little bit, which is interesting. So have a little battle on our hands between that top 4.
Yeah, happy days for Rudy. He seems to be his name's emerged a few times so far this season. But as I say, if you're a fantasy Premier League manager and you fancy joining up and battling against me and the lads, I say battling against me and the lads will be in the league. You just have to scroll down really far to see any of our teams. But if you want to battle against some of the other We Are West Ham listeners who are actually good at fantasy, then you can do that with the code I just mentioned there, lads. Brilliant show tonight, and I love talking to old West Ham players, what whenever we do it. It's always brilliant fun, and it's great to hear the stories. But I know, I hope everyone takes this in the correct way. I was pleasantly really surprised with Craig tonight. He was absolutely brilliant. Loved hearing those stories. It was just great to hear from him. Great anecdotes, and again, another guys from a different part of the world came over. Played. I think it's fair to say a lot of West Ham fans will remember him as a number 2, as a backup goalkeeper at the club. Still clearly has a soft spot for them and his time here. Jonesy, just brilliant stuff to hear from Craig, even though you're only there for half of it. Just another brilliant guest for the podcast.
Yeah, an absolute pleasure talking to Craig tonight. Some of the stories he gave us about Paolo and Harry Redknapp and John Moncur, and some of those really cool, great stories from inside the dressing room and from the training ground that fans probably never heard of or just enjoy listening to. And it's great to have hear those stories from players that fans just look back on with fond memories. So Craig, just an absolute gem. Definitely my favourite episode ever.
There you go. Massive bold statements from Jonesy tonight. That old Phantom Hammer really got to you the other week, didn't it? You're a new man. You're a new man since then. But Tom, you did me and Craig and the We Are West Ham listeners the honour of actually turning up for the entire interview, unlike your We Are West Ham colleague James Jones. What did you make, having spoken to Craig for the entire time that he gave up his time to join us?
Mate, I'm with Jonesy. I've not enjoyed an interview I've done more in anything, in any work of whatever I've done in work or this. I think it's one of the most enjoyments I've ever got out of speaking to someone. He was knowledgeable, hilarious anecdotes, and it's so, like you say, it's so nice to hear from someone who's willing to give us an insight into what it was actually like and some of the stories and say a bit about his person and his colleagues, and he's got a good relationship with everyone in that squad, and it's amazing to hear it from that point of view, and that's why we do this type of stuff. So, mate, absolute pleasure to have him on, and if we could do another 45 minutes with him, I'm sure he'd still come out with some absolute bangers, and long may that continue. We've had a great run of guests. Obviously, I wasn't here last week with Tony Cottee, not a bad replacement, lads, but yeah, happy days, mate. It is really good to have these blokes on, coming on and willing to talk about all things West Ham. It's brilliant. It makes it.
Exactly that. And so we will endeavour to keep bringing you high-level ex-West Ham guests like Craig, Tony Cottee the week before, of course, Tony Carr the week before that. We've got some in the pipeline, so keep tuning back in. Hello, as we always say in the last few weeks, to any new listeners. They're still creeping up. Really appreciate any of you existing guys who are obviously spreading the word a bit of the We Are West Ham podcast, available on all your major platforms. Of course, follow us on Twitter at @WeAre_West Ham. Congratulations, of course, to the competition winner who won a free West Ham United shirt for this season. There will be more giveaways, so like I say, do head over to our Twitter at @WeAre_West Ham and keep your eye out for more giveaways that will be running through the season. We're on Instagram, and of course we are on YouTube, so go down to the description in this podcast if you haven't already and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can see and watch the show being recorded as well as listen on your podcast platforms like usual. You'll have Craig Forrest tonight in his fetching Puma jacket, but you will notice his curly Roberto Baggio style bouffant that he used to style or model when he was playing for West Ham has disappeared, but still brilliant to have Craig on. So head on over to our YouTube, link to the channel in the description below on this podcast if you want to head over to there. Great show as ever, lads. Unlucky to lose at Liverpool at the weekend, a sign for sure of how far the club has come, that we're disappointed with only losing by the odd goal at Anfield. A draw against Manchester City the week before, I think we would have all taken that before those two games and before the season. We're doing all right. Fulham at home this weekend, huge game. Could this be the beginning of something special, or could it be back to same old West Ham? Stick with us, keep the faith, up the hammers, and we'll see you next week.